Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 381. A Trace of Guilt. Your elder sister is having it. The solitary falcon couldn't help but laugh. But he felt that this little girl was very bold and adorable. Debauchee was dumbfounded. It may be assumed that she gave the matter some thought before she asked. Elder sister Yuan, that can't be, is cooking rice the same as undressing? The men were left to stagger. This girl is too naive. She still doesn't understand it. Young lady. How is undressing not the same as cooking rice? Donghua Wendao stared back. It seemed as if he wanted to impart some education to her. After all, she wanted to cook with his nephew. So, he couldn't help but worry since he was the youngster's uncle. I'm only trying to enlighten you so that you can cook with my nephew properly the next time. However, he hadn't said much when Donghua Wenqing kicked him into the distance and said, "Get lost." Such an old man talking like this, don't you know that those words are taboo? Don't corrupt a child. However, Debauchee still stood there dumbfounded. 2 tears streamed down her cheeks after a while. She then sat down on the ground on her haunches and burst out crying since she was broken-hearted. Boo-hoo. I don't want to live, boo-hoo. I spent so much effort. But it's those 2 who are cooking rice. Boo-hoo. Everyone burst into laughter once again. The sun was setting in the west, but no one had come out of the tent yet. Moreover, the faint sounds were still emanating from it. The 5 people had slowly started becoming worried with the passage of time. Debauchee had spent her strength in crying, and was sitting there with a blank expression on her face. Still not done. Solitary Falcon looked at the sun impatiently. Those sounds are proof that the 2 of them are still at it. But hasn't it been too long? Isn't this too much? Donghua Wenqing smiled in an awkward manner, but remained silent. Donghua Wenjian didn't cross his limits either, and remained silent as well. No one said anything. Donghua Wendao smacked his lips. His face twitched as he muttered, "He's too fierce, even for someone who has eaten that medicine. I feel a bit inferior now." A long time had passed. The moon was high in the sky. The sounds of activity inside the tent eventually came to a stop. Those 5 great experts stood outside like clay models, but remained at a distance. Their bodies were drenched in sweat, and their foreheads had a weary color. It's been so long, this young Master Jun, he has persisted for too long even if he has taken that medicine, good stamina, ah. Jun Wuyi looked anxious. He was anticipating that the 2 people would quickly come out of the tent. But he didn't know how he would deal with them once they had made their way out. Moreover, he was afraid about what he would be able to do if those 2 couldn't bear the shame. After all, this was unfortunate coincidence, and a freak accident. And no one had been prepared for it. It was true that Guan Qinghan had suffered as an innocent victim. But Jun Moxie hadn't been at fault either. He too had suffered as another victim. And the fact that was most unbelievable was that Debauchee had been the culprit behind the entire incident. This had left everyone speechless. Even the wise and far-sighted Jun Wuyi couldn't help his head go around in circles at the thought of such a complicated matter. But who can I blame for this? Can I blame Debauchee? That's right. She is the main cause for this evil. So, she is the main culprit. But she did this out of love for that brat. Moreover, She didn't realize or understand what she did. And the little girl has also realized that she has run into a disaster. And her tears haven't stopped since then. Do I have the heart to scold her? Moreover, Qing Han, that poor girl. She couldn't have done anything to resist Jun Moxie if he had forced her after having lost his mind. But she didn't even call for help. What does that mean? She must have understood that something was wrong with Jun Moxie. In fact, she might have realized that an aphrodisiac was at play. So, she must have wanted to save Jun Moxie. That may be reason why she has endured everything in silence. I don't know what those excessive toxins would have done to Moxie's body if it weren't for Qing Han's sacrifice. This means that Qing Han has sacrificed her virtue to save Moxie, and has done a huge act of kindness towards the entire Jun family. So, how should the Jun family reciprocate? After all, her identity is very ambiguous. Perhaps the more appropriate question is, how do we treat her? This issue is giving me a headache. Qing Han's status must be announced to the entire world without delay. The third Master Jun's mind was in chaos. It could be said that he was finding it very difficult to make a decision. But how could the others share his thought process? For example, the Dongfang brothers would only be concerned with Jun Moxie. And they wouldn't have a problem as long as their nephew was all right. Why would they care about their nephew's wife? We're a wealthy family. Can't we afford to raise another person? We can even afford to raise 100 children without any problems. Moreover, having a multi-talented daughter-in-law is always a good thing since it means better qualities in the future generations. This Guan girl is obviously very good for us in that respect. She is beautiful. She is courageous. And daring. Plus, she can also take responsibility for her actions. We know Moxie's paternal uncle well. Wouldn't he consider these points in a good light? It was hard to say how much had passed. Jun Moxie finally woke up in a leisurely manner. He felt very comfortable. A pleasant aftertaste still lingered inside his head from the events of the past. He looked around with a distracted look on his face, and it took him a moment to sober up. The young Master Jun swayed and shook his head. Then, he slowly remembered what had happened, and couldn't help but groan. He sat up. But he heard a pained and frail moan the moment he moved. And this sound had come from beside him. Jun Moxie turned to look, and couldn't help but become startled. There was an elegant and divine beauty next to him. But her pretty face seemed to be in profound pain. Her breathing was labored. He leaned over and saw that her delicate skin didn't appear white anymore. It was green and purple, as a result of the havoc he had inflicted on her. However, the young Master Jun wouldn't have been so startled because of this fact alone. His astonishment was more strongly attributed to the fact that the said woman was Guan Qing Han. Jun Moxie got goosebumps due to the shock. What's going on? I clearly remember drinking the wine which Dugu Xiao Yi had brought me. And then, I had realized that she had put aphrodisiac in it. After that, she had said I would cook rice with me. Then, I felt a burning desire, and I soon turned into a ravaging wolf. After that, I don't remember what happened after that. But how come I find Guan Qing Han next to me now that I've woken up? This is a strange mystery. However, Jun Moxie then saw the bruises on Guan Qing Han's body, her pained expression, and her faint breathing. And he couldn't help as the strand of a strange feeling emerged from his heart. The little girl had given me a very powerful aphrodisiac. Even my special physique couldn't resist it, and I had lost my mind. Heavens know how much pain Guan Qinghan was forced to endure. He looked up to the sky to figure the time, and was left shocked once again. It's this late at night? I remember drinking wine from that bottle. But that had happened in the morning. So, did I torment Guan Qinghan the entire day? How could her delicate and soft body endure so much of it? I'm genuinely wretched. Jun Moxie let out a long sigh. His mind was in chaos. Jun Moxie wouldn't have felt this way if he had found debauchee there. After all, it was her medicine that had done this. And she had also talked about cooking rice. So, that would have been natural and logical. But it was Guan Qinghan instead. Jun Moxie felt extremely guilty. He wouldn't have felt any remorse if he had killed someone, or if he had committed arson. But this was a woman's innocence. Moreover, it had to be said that Guan Qinghan was completely innocent. Jun Moxie hurriedly got up and started to look for his clothes in confusion. He found them under his and her bodies. A few scraps of green and white clothing were also present there. And there were also a few blotches of bloodstains on them. Jun Moxie was vexed. And he hammered his head with his fist. The light green clothes belonged to the little girl. But where was debauchee? Jun Moxie tried hard to recall everything, but he could only remember bits and pieces. However, this situation was enough to allow him to guess that Guan Qinghan must have arrived to save debauchee. However, he had lost his mind under his urges, and must have held Guan Qinghan there by force. Jun Moxie sighed and walked over to the table. He then picked up the water bag and drank some water from it. His footsteps felt light. In fact, he felt like he was floating. But he still needed support for his tired body. Then, the young Master Jun carefully picked up Guan Qinghan and gently put her down on the bed. His body had undergone a great change, and his physique was unusually strong as well. Moreover, his physical ability to withstand powerful toxins was also quite strong. Any other individual would have died due to excess release of the aphrodisiac, even before the drug had managed to reach their belly. The man would have at least been gravely injured if not dead. And the possibility of permanent impotence couldn't be discarded either. Jun Moxie looked at the painful scars on Guan Qinghan's body. Even her lips had been bitten and left behind in a bloody and injured state. He felt extreme tenderness as he looked at her. The young Master Jun hadn't felt this way in either of his lives. It would have been okay if Guan Qinghan had merely saved debauchee and left. But she didn't leave. She must have seen my condition. And she must have figured out that I was affected by a heavy toxin. So, she must have figured that the consequences would have been dire if I didn't give vent to them. And so, she must have sacrificed herself. How could Guan Qinghan not have anticipated the things she would have to bear, especially given her sensitive identity as a woman? It had to be understood that this world society deemed a woman's chastity to be more important than her life. And losing it in such a manner was worse than dead to a woman. And Jun Moxie felt guilty because he had wanted to take it. He had felt so much guilt for the first time in either of his lives. In fact, the guilt pierced the very bottom of his heart. For the first time, he felt as if he owed someone. Jun Moxie looked at the staunch woman who had nearly died while saving his life. But he couldn't understand what he felt in his heart. He felt pained. This feeling was complicated and painful. And it was something he couldn't put into words. This was the first time that he had developed such a large soft spot for a woman in his heart. Jun Moxie gently covered Guan Qinghan with a quilt. Then, he took the water bag and softly moved it to her lips in order to make her drink the water. But she had been devastated and had lost her consciousness long back. So, the water from the bag refused to go down her throat since she was unable to take it in. Jun Moxie hesitated a bit. Then, he finally made a firm decision. He faced up and took a mouthful of water in his mouth. Then, he looked down and lowered his lips to hers. He then transferred one gulp of water, then another, then another. He had transferred a lot of it before he finally felt her heartbeat stabilize. He stopped after that happened and gently held her hand. And then, he started to transfer his extremely exquisite and pure innate aura into her body. Guan Qinghan's breathing eventually stabilized to a normal level after a long time passed. Even a bit of color had been restored to her face. She soon slipped into deep slumber. Jun Moxie stopped transferring his aura once he felt reassured. He then saw Guan Qinghan's slender face. Her face was usually cold and aloof, but it appeared like a thing of unmatched beauty at this time. Suddenly, a trace of tenderness welled up in his heart. Tender feelings. This was a new and different feeling for Jun Moxie. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 382. The Responsibility and Farce. Jun Moxie had never had time for genuine emotions in his previous life since he had been a hitman. So, he had never experienced romance. He would merely spend silver and gold to buy a good time if he wanted to satisfy his physiological needs. And that was because he couldn't afford to love. He couldn't afford it despite being the king of assassins. One's heart is bound to fetter if one falls in love. And having a family can be of grave disadvantage against any opponent since the enemy can easily make the said family a target. Jun Moxie had been assassin. So, it was hard to tell how many families he had seen fall to tragedies by the hands of assassins. He wasn't afraid that his family would harm him. Rather, he was afraid that he would cause harm to his family. The pain of losing one's loved ones, whether oneself or close relatives, is extremely painful torment. Therefore, he didn't dare to do it. He genuinely couldn't dare to do it. He had run into many beautiful women ever since he had come to this world. Guan Qinghan, debauchee, Princess Ling Meng, or even that Silver Blizzard City's Princess Han Yen Meng, each one of these women were one amongst many. And it was very rare to find such peerless beauties. They may have been cold and aloof, lovable and cute, graceful, or even very intelligent, but each one would be considered the finest woman around. Jun Moxie admired their beauty. In fact, he had a very favorable impression of them. But he had always ensured that he never crossed the line with them. He was fully aware that debauchee liked him to the bone. But Jun Moxie still wavered and found it difficult to decide. It wasn't that he was wavering when one comes to think of it, it was more like he was considering different aspects. He had a special feeling for Guan Qinghan in his heart. But Jun Moxie had never revealed it. This was because Jun Moxie hadn't yet realized that he could start a family now. Perhaps he wasn't prepared for it in his heart. However, he would never have thought that he would lose his mind due to some unfortunate circumstances and freak accidents. And he would then forcefully snatch away Guan Qinghan's virtue, and thus making her his first woman. Jun Moxie wouldn't pay much attention to a woman who was very pretty, or even visually captivating. He may have enjoyed himself by means of flirtation, but he would forget her once he had turned his head away. But he could never do the same to Guan Qinghan. Jun Moxie had opened his eyes and had seen her besides him. He had then tried to assess the cause and effect of that incident. And his heart had filled to the brim with an acute feeling of responsibility and tenderness once he had realized the matter. Responsibility. Responsibility towards a woman. Jun Moxie clearly understood that this feeling wasn't something he was going to reject, even if he couldn't understand it properly. In fact, this emotion felt particularly warm on the contrary. He was unaware of Guan Qinghan's opinion on the subject. But Jun Moxie had already decided that this woman would be his woman from this day onwards. The first woman the evil monarch had accepted. Jun Moxie gently caressed the soft and long hair that covered the pillow her head rested upon. And he felt a touch of tranquility inside his heart. I've finally found a companion in this world. And it feels like I don't have to worry about getting separated from her. This is a very wonderful feeling. These fetters, these feeling of tenderness, aren't as awful as I thought they would be. The corners of Jun Moxie's mouth drew back into a smile as he looked at Guan Qinghan's face. He then drooped down her face and gently snuggled her forehead as he said softly, "I'm sorry, and thank you." After that, he got up and decided to leave. He went out without saying anything. His body's innate quality was genuinely amazing. He had been in an extremely fatigued state a while ago. But things had improved very significantly in a short while. He had recuperated to a considerable extent, and his aura had also been reinstated. His spirit sense had detected 5 or 6 people outside. And he could tell that they were standing there with a foolish expression on their faces. Jun Moxie knew who they were, and why they were there. The sounds of activity in my tent mustn't have been faint. Moreover, it had lasted for a very long period of time. Therefore, it would have been very strange if the third uncle and the others hadn't taken any measures. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly. He had already guessed the dangers he would face once he'd leave his tent. After all, the fact that third uncle had freed Guan Qinghan from her matrimonial ties to the Jun family hasn't been made known to the world. So, everyone must have thought that Guan Qinghan was still my sister-in-law. So, my actions tantamount to forcing myself on my sister-in-law. However, Jun Moxie didn't wish to escape from this situation. In fact, he wouldn't escape. If he had done the deed, then he had done it. What was the worst that could happen? A real man would admit his fault. And how could he not support his woman's happiness? How could he be called a man if he didn't? I will face it. It may be a raging storm, but I will face it. In fact, only I can face it. Guan Qinghan's eyelids softly blinked at first. Then, they slowly opened as Jun Moxie walked out. 2 lines of tears flowed from the corner of her eyes. However, her face had a faintly satisfied smile on it. Is this what having a family feels like? Is this what having a husband feels like? This feeling is amazing. And it's something I don't wish to let go of. She had suffered a lot. And she had lost face. But she didn't have any regret in her heart. She hadn't been able to stop herself once she had guessed Jun Moxie's circumstances. It could be said that she had a choice in this matter at first. And she could have left in the beginning if she had wanted to. Therefore, it could be said that she had voluntarily opted for this. Then, Jun Moxie had been very gentle and considerate a moment ago since he thought that she hadn't woken up yet. And that had made her feel happy, very happy. And that's because he had done that whilst believing that she hadn't woken up yet. This indicated that those gentle feelings had genuinely emerged from his heart. That was tenderness from a real man. And this had raised huge waves of chaos in Guan Qinghan's heart. This was a feeling of being taken care of by someone. This felt genuinely nice and warm, so warm. I think I'll cry. Tears streamed down Guan Qinghan's face as she smiled. Her face resembled a rosy flower that had been moistened with the early morning dew. Her smiling face was like a beautiful blossom. It was a very touching moment. But then, she recalled her embarrassing identity, and suddenly became sad. What should I do? This is a sin. Jun Moxie was covered in cold sweat as he walked out. This cold sweat hadn't arisen from the physical exercise he had done with Guan Qinghan. Jun Moxie admittedly felt uncomfortable on a physical level, but he was more worried about Guan Qinghan's suffering. I have a robust physique, and that wretched medicine had a huge effect on me. I had lost consciousness due to that drug, and those movements had continued for the entire day. How could Guan Qinghan endure all that? I don't even know how berserk I had gone. He had later noticed that Guan Qinghan had nearly died. So, it was rather fortunate that he hadn't continued any longer. In fact, Guan Qinghan's fragrant and delicate body would have been vanquished if he had continued for even a quarter of a day more. That was a close call. It was quite risky. Dugu Xiaoyi's medicine was indeed fierce, but it fortunately wasn't too excessive. Moreover, Guan Qinghan's body isn't too feeble either. Her physique has always been good since she has been trained to fight since early childhood. So, her physique is much better than normal women. And that's why she was able to endure that frantic torment. Otherwise, the situation could have taken a turn for the worst. However, Jun Moxie was completely unaware that the drug which the little girl had given him wasn't too excessive. It was far beyond the realms of excessive. Dugu Xiaoyi had feared that her rice won't be properly cooked. Therefore, she had gone all out when she had added the medicine to the wine, and she had thus emptied the entire packet. Jun Moxie had a special innate physique, and Hong Jun Pagoda's aura had also nourished his corporeal body. These factors had neutralized a part of the medicine's effect. Otherwise, it was quite possible that he would have been engaged with Guan Qinghan still. The young Master Jun smiled bitterly as he went out. His body had recovered to some extent, but it still felt empty under his feet. In fact, he felt like he was walking on cotton like mist. He could feel that his feet were still weak as he walked. Dang! This is so exhausting. I was feeling so good a moment ago. Jun Moxie hadn't realized that he had been working non-stop for the past 10 hours. And the fact that he was able to stand and walk after that intense high rate and continuous exercise was a huge miracle in itself. This may be hard to imagine for some. But the said individual may try doing push-ups for 10 hours without a break. It could be guaranteed that the said individual wouldn't even be able to get up after that. Jun Wuyi and the others appeared to be gloomy and at a loss. Then, they looked at Jun Moxie as he staggered out owing to the weakness he felt in his legs. Consequently, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and their expressions became strange. The little girl was seated on the ground with a blank expression on her face. And she started to tremble when she saw Jun Moxie. She then burst out crying with sorrow and regret. Jun Moxie was startled at this. You gave me that medicine, and started the fire. Then, you ran away. And now you're crying? You are the one to feel wronged here. He was unaware that Dugu Xiaoyi felt as if she had come off worse while trying to gain an advantage. She had tried to do a skillful maneuver, but had been clumsy and had dropped the stone on her own foot instead. She was scared because of the reversal of fortunes. And thus, her heart was full of complex feelings she couldn't endure. She had originally planned to cook rice and monopolize him. Consequently, the rice had been cooked thoroughly. In fact, it was boiling. But she didn't like it because it was scalding hot. Therefore, she didn't eat it, and was unable to take advantage of her plan. How could she not be depressed? And then, she saw Jun Moxie emerge from the tent, and recalled that Guan Qinghan had been taking advantage of her plan this entire time. This made her feel wronged and angry. In fact, she wanted to say something, but was unable to. She wanted to shout at first, but she started to cry instead. Jun Moxie had barely moved out of the tent when he saw the solitary falcon give him a thumbs up. And then, his 3 Dongfang uncles gave him a very strange stare that reeked of innuendos, which were very meaningful indeed. However, Jun Wuyi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he saw his nephew come out. He looked at Jun Moxie through the dark circles that surrounded his eyes, and asked, "You've come out? How are you? And how is Qinghan?" The third Master Jun wasn't worried about his nephew in reality. The young Master Jun looked weak and unstable. In fact, his face even seemed a bit lean. But he was still safe. So, Jun Wuyi was actually worried about his adopted daughter Guan Qinghan. The third Master Jun had figured that Qinghan would have wanted to help Jun Moxie since was suffering from that unbearable toxin, and may have decided to staunchly endure him. However, it would a horrifying scenario if she became depressed over losing her virtue, and decided to end her life because of it. I am fine, my legs are a bit sore, and sister-in-law, Qinghan is still sleeping, she's also fine. Jun Moxie scratched his head. He felt extremely embarrassed as he answered. The young Master Jun had called Qinghan sister-in-law out of habit. But he had immediately realized that she wasn't his sister-in-law anymore since he had decided to acknowledge her as his woman. How can I still call her sister-in-law? That felt very strange. Jun Moxie wasn't met with a scolding the moment he came out. And this was rather strange and rare of his uncle's nature. He had expected his uncle to hurl abuses at him. In fact, he wouldn't have been very surprised if his uncle had broken his legs. Therefore, Jun Moxie couldn't grasp the reason behind his uncle's current reactions. Could third uncle be confused because of his anger? Even the feet the mightiest of men would have become weak after such a long time. The solitary falcon rolled his eyes. But this brat can still walk. His endurance is amazing. Great. My nephew. Simply amazing. 10 hours. 10 full hours. This third uncle of yours admires your lower back strength and prostrates himself. It's genuinely exceptional. Dongfang Wendao grinned as he patted Jun Moxie's shoulder. He then smiled while his eyebrows shot up. You have proven yourself to be the son of the White Commander. You will have many children in the future. The future of the Jun family is indeed bright and glorious. Your uncle has high hopes from you. Jun Moxie was feeling very weak at the moment. So, he was nearly slapped to the ground by his uncle's hand. And then, his face became dark when he heard those words. What? What are you saying, uncle? How is today's matter related to being the son of the White Commander? Dongfang Wenqing obviously got agitated at this remark, and spoke. Third, You will be disciplined after we return. You're his uncle. How can you say such things? Do you have no shame? You are a very filthy creature. Brother Mo Xia. Dugu Xiao Yi rushed over and hugged him tightly as she continued to cry. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I shouldn't have left. Dugu Xiao Yi was feeling extremely sad. I prepared the rice, but someone else ate it. However, the little girl was unaware that the dose she had given Jun Moxie was far too strong for her own good. Guan Qinghan's body was stronger than her own. But even Guan Qinghan had barely been able to endure the medicine's effect. So, it could be reckoned that a tragedy would have struck if Dugu Xiao Yi had replaced Guan Qinghan. And it would have been a great tragedy at that. In fact, it could have changed a lot of things. One could try to imagine if grandfather Dugu were to find out that his precious granddaughter had survived the battle, but had later died, in bed. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Jun Moxie's body felt very weak at this time. Therefore, he hadn't been able to dodge her. Consequently, he had first felt the soft body of a maiden in his embrace. And then, he saw Dugu Xiao Yi's tears fall like raindrops. In fact, she had cried herself breathless. Jun Moxie couldn't help but feel his heart softening. Sigh. I have already learnt the cause and effect of this incident. And I'm aware that you didn't do this on your own free will. So, first of all, Jun Wu Yi moved his lips for a long time, but couldn't add anything to it. He eventually waved his sleeves and spoke. Never mind. I will write a letter and inform your grandfather of the matter. And I will also put my suggestions in that letter. However, your grandfather will decide on how you should be dealt with in the light of this incident. He finished and turned around to walk away. He walked a few steps, and suddenly turned his neck around. After that, he gnashed his teeth and spoke. You little beast. You better behave in the days to follow. Your daddy will break your legs if there's even one trivial incident. Do you hear your daddy clearly? The third Master Jun had actually referred to himself as daddy, and had rained down a mouthful of curses. The severity of his anger was rather evident from his words, especially in those last words. Moreover, the tone of his voice had been extremely strict. After that, his face turned ashen as he walked away. Jun Moxie repeatedly promised in reply. And his embarrassment was visible on his face. Ah! So, Dugu Xiao Yi has already confessed everything. No wonder I didn't get any scolding. But this is extremely absurd. There was a whooshing sound beside him as Solitary Falcon and his 3 Dongfang uncles disappeared into the shadows. However, they parted with a few words: recuperate properly. Don't lose your kidney. Brother Mo Xia. Dugu Xiao Yi was still hugging him tightly. She looked up miserably and asked. You're not mad at me, right? Mad? He was mad when it comes to it. In fact, he was very mad. He had never been so miserable in either of his lives since he had never fallen for an amateur's trick like this one. Moreover, he had fallen for a trick that had been planned by someone like that little girl. This was extremely humiliating for him. However, he couldn't deny that he was somewhat delighted in the secrecy of his heart. I'm very popular. This little girl even went to the lengths of drugging me to get me. Besides, I would have never done that with Guan Qinghan if it weren't for this. Wouldn't this be considered a lucky stroke? Didn't I end up profiting from a disaster? Guan Qinghan would turn 21 years old that year. That would make her 4.5 years older than Jun Moxie. And Jun Xie had already annulled her marriage to their house. So, the two would have to worry about her marriage now. After all, a 21-year-old unmarried woman was considered quite old for a marriage in this era. So, how could he not be anxious? In any case, Jun Moxie felt that the opportunity to nominate himself for marrying her didn't exist. This was because she had once been his sister-in-law. Her marriage may have been annulled, but no one could deny the fact that it had once happened. Therefore, their union by marriage was impossible to happen given his grandfather's antiquated opinion, and that of the public around the world. The society would attack and break such a scandalous relationship up. And what would they say if they got to know such a couple existed? That brother and sister-in-law were having an affair this entire time. They're so indecent, and so on. He had no choice but to think about such matters. Jun Moxie obviously didn't care about such things. But would the two great families not care about this? Would Guan Qinghan not care about this? Therefore, it could be said that those two individuals had no hope left. It was a case of fait accompli at this time. However, they didn't know how many difficulties they would have to face. Guan Qinghan had been subjected to this because of the curious coincidence Dugu Xiaoyi's actions had evolved into. How could this woman run away from it? We shouldn't think of ways to evade this matter. Instead, we should consider methods to get through it. One aspect is positive, while the other is negative. There is a difference of heaven and earth between these two aspects. They can't be compared on any level. This event has been an unfortunate accident, but it had reduced the future variables very considerably. Feck that. I will continue to do what I want to. Who will dare to gossip like that? Who can control who or what I wish to love? Other people's views and society's opinions are nothing in my eyes. Something odd had come to happen. Therefore, Jun Moxie was a bit depressed, but he also felt a little invigorated. In fact, he didn't feel very angry either. Besides, Dugu Xiaoyi had only intended to strengthen her hold on him by the means of this plan. She didn't want someone to snatch him away from her. She was young and ignorant. Sometimes kind-hearted intentions can develop into bad things, and that was acceptable as long as nothing overly harmful came of it. Jun Moxie was resigned to not regard the little girl angrily. He didn't wish to scold or hit her either. But he wasn't going to let her off very easily either. Ignorance isn't a sin. But it can become a sin if it results in grave consequences. What would he do if he didn't teach her a lesson and she decided to act willfully in the future as well? It was important to understand that this incident had packed off two people to hell. Not mad. You think I won't be mad after what you've done? Jun Moxie thought for a while, and replied slowly. But boo-hoo, I made a mistake. Dugu Xiaoyi sobbed and wiped her tears as she continued to cry out. I should have eaten my boo-hoo. I'm very disappointed with this matter. Jun Moxie snorted and continued coldly. I don't wish for something like this to happen again. Yes. Yes. I won't dare to. I really won't dare to. I will change. Dugu Xiaoyi nodded like pounded garlic. It was like she had been relieved of a huge burden. But it also felt that her heart was somewhat sore from the pain. The little girl had seemingly grown up a lot post this incident. I'll go back and learn about this carefully, by asking my mother. I'm very sorry. The little girl started rubbing the lapel of her dress. Jun Moxie staggered, and nearly fell down. It had suddenly gotten rather hard to breathe. In fact, things had almost reached the point of suffocation for him. You want to learn about this thing by asking your mother? Since you're not mad about the cooked rice you ate with Sister Guan, do you want to have some with me also? The little girl's eyes opened round and wide as she persevered and asked. We'll discuss this issue later. Jun Moxie's forehead was riddled with drops of sweat. I don't care. You and I are going to cook properly. The little girl pouted. Elder Sister Guan ate what I had prepared and took advantage of me. My mother didn't tell me about this properly. I don't know what cooking rice is. Jun Moxie was dripping with sweat at that time. The angry thoughts had disappeared from his mind, and the only thoughts he had were those of getting away quickly. Initiating the young to such a thing is overwhelming. Dugu Xiao Yi was made to leave after endless persuasion and her inevitable weeping. Jun Moxie was physically and emotionally tired as he initiated the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune, and staggered back to his tent. This is Farce. There was silence for some time. Then, a low voice emanated from the tree where the 5 great experts had earlier taken a rest. The voice was soft and cold in tenor. Yet, it was supple as well. It was like the icy summit of a mountain top, aloof and haughty, unrestrained but naturally graceful. Anyone who had listened to that voice could have guessed that the speaker was an apex personality of the entire world. Yes. This is bullshit. The only one benefiting is that June brat, another sharp yet tactful voice chimed in. It was unknown when 2 people had stationed themselves on top of that big tree. The 5 experts had been below it only a moment ago. However, they hadn't become aware of this. This clearly showed how formidable the cultivation of those 2 people was. It might not necessarily be a benefit. The information we have collected suggested that the little bastard shouldn't even have been able to walk together with that Guan Qinghan. But he has slept with her now. This is a different variable. In fact, this will be a very embarrassing variable for the Jun family. Let's see how the Jun family deals with this. The first voice replied in a long drawn-out manner. However, the effects of this matter won't be small for the Jun family, no matter how they handle it. The sharp voice somewhat took pleasure in others' misfortune. It then quickly added, Eldest sister, you want to make that brat your disciple. So, why don't you make a move at this time? Let's just grab him and walk away in silence. Make him my disciple? I just want to torture him. It seemed that the owner of the first voice was gnashing their teeth. That shameless bastard. I would have torn him to 1,000 shreds if it weren't for that. What could that little brat with such an insignificant cultivation do to offend you? Eldest sister, the sharp voice asked in a confused-sounding tone. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 383. I'm a selfish man. Offend me? How could a brat with such low skill levels offend me? I just don't like him. That's all. The first voice became somewhat embarrassed for a second. Then, it quickly reinstating its composure, and said, Don't ever think that I will have any affection for such a lecherous face. I only faked those feelings. I wish to beat him up and teach him a proper lesson. And I will feel very happy once I've taught him a lesson that my heart desires. The other voice fell silent. It was clearly shocked. What happened to the eldest's voice tone when she was speaking that sentence? A long time passed before the second voice spoke again. Then, what are you going to do, eldest sister? The aim of our trip is to travel the world. So, we can follow these people for now. And, didn't you hear Dongfang Wenqing? He said that they might take that brat to hide with the Dongfang family. This means that these people might part ways with the Jun family's troops later. You see how I handle that brat when that time comes. I'll give him worse than death, the first voice snorted. So, why didn't eldest sister intervene when Dugu Xiao Yi had given him that ridiculous medicine? The sharp voice sounded confused. He wouldn't have been able to do anything if we had stepped in at that time. We would have gotten to see him choke on his urine. In fact, it would have been one of the worst ways of torture. Wouldn't that have been an interesting thing? Watching him choke on his urine would have been one of the worst ways of torture. Wouldn't that have been an interesting thing? These two women who were speaking these words seemed more ruthless than the other. The strength of these two mysterious women was extremely high. They were exceptionally formidable. Intervene? Why would you wish to intervene then? The first voice again seemed to have a strain of embarrassment in its usually cold texture. Green Hunter, you and I have taken this form, we are in the form of women at the moment. So, we couldn't have stopped him from doing that, scandal. We could have killed him with ease, but, stopping him, we couldn't have done that. Eldest sister is right. We shouldn't have intervened since we couldn't have stopped him. The second voice turned out to be that of Green Hunters. She had given this angle some thought, and couldn't help but become a bit embarrassed as a result. That man is despicable, and he's in need of a lesson. But, he still has some importance, and he doesn't really need to die. The first voice snorted and said, moreover, the pills involved in the transaction with the sacred fruit might come via him. Didn't you hear the solitary falcon speak that the mysterious man is that brat's master? And, didn't you report that the mysterious person has made a solemn vow to give us those efficacious pills in exchange for the sacred fruit? That's right. I had almost forgotten. The Snake King's eyes shone. Things change a lot if we consider that. That mysterious person's power is amazing and mystical. I still feel a bit traumatic at the thought of that previous experience. I feel that even elder sister might have a tough time in competing with that towering strength. My meeting with that mysterious man was short. Moreover, he didn't fight for real. He merely moved and killed Li Ju Tian in the most deceptive of ways. Yes, I can't compare with such skills. I can't even figure out what technique that man had used. I think it was something like the flame of enlightenment, or some other form of pure fire. It will be good if such a skilled person doesn't have any hatred for us. And, we can ensure that this person gives us more pills if we control his young disciple. We will at least have some cards in our hands in that case. The person speaking these words was the Lord of Tian Fa Venerable Mei. Therefore, we can't afford to be careless with this matter. We heard them say that he might go to the Dongfang family. But, there are many issues relating to that as well. And, one of them is the oath that family had to take. He. Our departure from the Tian Fa forest has already completed half of their oath. The remaining part relates to the crumbling of the Snow Sword Mountain in those snowy peaks. That would need some planning. In any case, this is a very interesting matter. So that's how it is. You have already thought of so much. Eldest. The eldest genuinely deserves to be called the Lord, the Snake King said cheerfully. So, we just watch the fun now. Watch the fun? Not necessarily. Perhaps we might have the opportunity to join in on the fun. Venerable Mei smiled lightly. Everything became quiet. The two didn't speak any longer. Suddenly, it seemed as if they had never existed. Anyone looking at the tree from the side would have been amazed to notice that their shadows hadn't been visible this entire time, even though there were sounds coming from the tree. In fact, not a single twig on the branches of that tree had shaken this entire time. Jun Moxie was in a difficult situation at the moment. In fact, he was in a very difficult situation. He had just entered his tent when he had seen an elegant figure standing in front of his bed. It seemed like a beautiful and graceful figurine. Guan Qinghan. Her face was expressionless. It was as cold as it had been in the past. She was staring at the bed in a daze. And she held her tattered clothes in her hand. The sign of her chastity had been smeared on them. She was dressed in white clothes. Her current dressing had belonged to Jun Moxie. So, they were quite wide for her. However, they clung to her slender waist even better, and made it look even lovelier. Her expression was complicated and somewhat sorrowful, somewhat shy, a little distracted, and even a little disappointed. Guan Qinghan's body trembled slightly as she heard Jun Moxie enter. Her face had become red, but she didn't turn around. However, her face soon became pale again. Jun Moxie stationed himself behind her. Neither of the two spoke for a while. They merely listened to each other breathe, and remained silent. They were only a short distance apart from each other. But it seemed that they were at the opposite ends of the world. The two of them had been involved in that intimate act a while ago. But it still seemed if they were strangers. The atmosphere in the tent had become stifling as a result. It had become exceptionally stifling. Jun Moxie smiled in a gentle manner after a while. And then, he suddenly sat down on the wooden chair behind her. Jun Moxie looked at Guan Qinghan's back. But it seemed as if he was talking to himself. I know that the feelings in your heart must be complicated. In fact, you must be at a loss. You must be confused about what is to be done from this point onwards. In fact, you must even be confused about what's to be done at this moment. Guan Qinghan's body trembled. Actually, even I don't know what's to be done. I'm confused as well. Jun Moxie said slowly. Guan Qinghan's delicate body trembled and she couldn't help but turn her head. She wanted to turn around at first, but she forced her head back instead. You don't know what's to be done. You don't know what's to be done with a girl next. She realized the entire matter as she listened to Jun Moxie's slow voice. Guan Qinghan had finally understood Dugu Xiao Yi's strange behavior of the past 2 days. She couldn't help but sigh. This matter is a result of an unfortunate accident. It was a great coincidence, it's just that I have been entrapped in this calamity. Jun Moxie took a deep breath and spoke with determination. I know that this matter is an unfortunate accident. It was a freak coincidence. However, you are my woman from now on whether you wish for it or not. Your previous status is of no relevance anymore. You are my woman, whether you admit it or not. And that is an unchangeable fact. This will never change. This will never change, no matter the time and place. Jun Moxie spoke these words slowly and carefully. And yet, he also seemed very dominating. However, his unusually dominating mannerism didn't create a sense of antipathy in Guan Qinghan's heart. Instead, her heart felt an indescribable feeling of commitment. Jun Moxie's voice strengthened as he continued to speak. Being called my woman may not be easy. But I will spare no effort to cherish and protect you as long as you're my woman. And I'll ensure that you never suffer any grievance. Perhaps I can give you time to think it over if you're not ready yet. Jun Moxie's tone was unhurried. We know that your engagement with my brother was worthless. It was worse than worthless. And you're no longer my brother's wife. Your third uncle's adopted daughter now. I hope you remember that. There will be many complications if we get together, and there will be many slanderous rumors. But you needn't worry about any of that. Jun Moxie then smiled and said, these are matters of men. There will be a lot of rumors, but I will ensure that none of them reach your ears. Not a single word. Do you understand? So, the thing you're worried about doesn't really exist. Guan Qinghan's shoulder moved a bit, and she suddenly seemed to relax. I believe that you must understand my temperament properly. I am not a great hero, or very heroic. I'm a very selfish man. There aren't many things I care about in this world. But I've always cared about my loved ones, my family, my woman, and my brothers. Nothing else matters as long as they're safe and happy. And I, Jun Moxie, have nothing to do with the other people around the world. I'm not a noble man. Jun Moxie smiled mischievously and spoke frankly with an aura of assurance. I'm afraid that I will disappoint you if you expect great achievement from me. Because I'm not a hero. I am a selfish man. I'm so selfish that if any man says that he wishes to bully my people, or embarrass my woman, that person will suffer the cruelest form revenge from me. And that includes your Guan family, because they aren't one of the people I care about. Guan Qinghan was unable to remain calm because she suddenly had a flash of realization. So, she turned around while biting her lips. Her expression was extremely complicated as she looked at Jun Moxie's calm face. Her mouth opened and closed for a bit, but she still didn't say a word. She didn't know how her family would regard her once this matter became public. She didn't know how she would have to suffer at their hands. And the thought of this had sent her heart in a frenzied state of panic. And she simply couldn't think of what to do anymore. Those flat-sounding words from Jun Moxie had suddenly left Guan Qinghan to feel a chill inside her heart. And she had started to worry about them instead of being concerned about herself at this time. She tried to imagine what Jun Moxie's reaction would be if someone from the Guan family disrespected her. Moreover, the Guan family's impression on Jun Moxie was very poor since they had tried to force her to marry into the Shui Han manor. Jun Moxie is unlikely to let them off easily. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 384. The Undercurrent in the Capital. Jun Moxie would rarely ever be serious. But anything he'd ever say in a serious manner would stand to represent a commitment. And Guan Qinghan had understood this fact clearly by this time. However, it was the understanding of this point that had left her to feel increasingly scared. Someone would have spat out a mouthful of saliva in contempt if he hadn't spoken those words with a serious look. However, no one could have done that in this instance. No one can ever change his decision. He had similarly vowed to protect me when faced with the Shui Han manor's threat. So, I'm sure he means it this time as well. Everyone has always called me a licentious debauchee. They've said that I'm ignorant and useless. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly. However, I don't understand a woman's mind in reality. Nor do I know how to talk of love. Maybe I should carefully cajole you at this time, or convey gentle feelings with honey-laced words. You have done a lot for me. And I'm not a heartless man. But I genuinely don't know how to say these things. I have never talked about love. I have genuinely never talked about it. Yesterday's matter, it was my first time in this life. And it was painful for me as well. I'm not lying to you. You weren't the only one who felt pain. I felt it too. In fact, I feel a little dizzy at this time. I can tell you this, but I felt very embarrassed at the thought of mentioning this to the others. Jun Moxie's face seemed pained and a little embarrassed. Guan Qinghan had wanted to laugh out for a brief second. She had been a maiden woman until then. So, this instance had been her first time as well. And she too had felt a lot of pain. So, how could she have felt like laughing at this time? It was because she had heard these words from Jun Moxie's mouth. It was very hard to believe these words since they were coming from the mouth of a young master with such an ill and loathsome reputation. But Guan Qinghan didn't laugh since she saw the expression on Jun Moxie's face. Jun Moxie's expression was strange and awkward. But Guan Qinghan could tell that those words weren't lies. In fact, they had seemingly come straight from his heart. Is possible that this is true? The legendary tyrant, the greatest debauchee of Tianxiang, is a first time in reality? It can't be, right? There would still be a little credibility to the words of a man who says that a few women in the spirit fog lake are virgins. But Jun Moxie. However, Guan Qinghan hadn't listened properly. Jun Moxie had specifically said in this life. Or maybe she had heard him clearly. However, she was unable to understand the meaning contained in those two specific words. Guan Qinghan's eyebrows skewed, and her face became cold once again. Jun Moxie waited for a moment. He noticed that Guan Qinghan's lustrous mouth had opened for a moment, but her complexion had eased to some extent. So, he couldn't help relax as he said, "In fact, last night, I had the medicine and my mind had spiraled into a chaos. I know that I had exerted the entire of my strength, but I didn't feel a thing. It's indeed a huge pity." Guan Qinghan hadn't expected that the little brat would speak such words right when he was being serious. Consequently, her face became red with embarrassment. Jun Moxie's intention was to use those words to probe the situation. He had always noticed that Guan Qinghan would get enraged whenever he would say or do something foul and bold. In fact, he couldn't help but gather the courage to get up in order to hold her in his arms. However, Guan Qinghan was startled by this and hastily took 2 steps back. She wiped the tears from her cheeks. And her face became cold as she said, "We were helpless in today's matter. But it was a mistake. I wanted to save you. I didn't do it for you alone, but also for the Jun family's sole heir. We have made that mistake, but it doesn't mean that you can recklessly disrespect me. Jun Moxie. We can't make that mistake again. A mistake only adds to a mistake. You are acting willful again." Jun Moxie stopped his hand midair. His complexion changed a few times in a short while. Then, he eventually retracted his hand and spoke up. "You can't accept something at one moment and say something else later. You said, 'You are my woman.' So, why would you run away now? Your status in the family will change after we return. And third uncle will take you as his adopted daughter. We'll have a huge banquet. And all the respected individuals of the world will come to attend. So, I believe that things will slowly simmer down. And then, I can take you through the doorway of marriage." Who said that I'll marry you?" Guan Qinghan was embarrassed and angry. "I've never seen such a tyrant. He has spoken no sweet words to me yet. And he still wants to marry me. Whether you get married or not, is your business. And me taking a wife or not, is my thing." Jun Moxie's eyebrows rose as he gave a nefarious smile and said, "Come, beautiful, you've had an exhausting day. I know you're tired. Hurry up, and I'll send to you to take rest." Guan Qinghan's face instantly became red. And then, it became as white as ice. She looked at Jun Moxie and enunciated every word she spoke. "You rest. Jun Moxie. Don't try those methods with me. Don't make me look down on you again. And you can forget about what happened today. You go back to your grandfather and tell him everything. He will settle the accounts. And I will never stay here with you for the life of me. Jun Moxie smiled and replied, I said that I'll send you off to rest. I never said that I'll make you stay here. Elder sister seems to be thinking crooked things. Guan Qinghan's eyes opened wide as she pointed a shaky finger at him. You lecher. You hoodlum. I will be your elder sister. Jun Moxie laughed out loud. Let's look at this. You are third uncle's adopted daughter. So, does means you're my elder sister, right? Guan Qinghan got extremely mad. She swung her sleeves and turned to go. But she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her lower body the moment she took a step. Her forehead got covered with beads of cold sweat since she couldn't take another step. Guan Qinghan had just lost her virtue. In fact, she had endured hardships for the entire day. That had already been too much for her delicate body. And adding oil to fire. Jun Moxie had been very rough. Jun Moxie saw this and rushed forward. He stooped down, and his left hand went under her neck, while his right hand curved under her legs. He held her like one holds a baby, and brought her body up towards his chest. The young master then stood up, smiled, and walked outside while carrying her in his arms. He smiled as he said in a lowered tone, Don't worry. I'll take you back. Guan Qinghan was alarmed and ashamed by this. How could she live with pride if she was carried back by him in this manner? Therefore, she couldn't help but struggle in a vigorous manner. Jun Moxie controlled her body in a firm manner, and didn't allow her move. He then steadily walked out. Guan Qinghan felt so embarrassed and ashamed at this that she hid her head in his arms. The young lady didn't wish for anyone to see her, and didn't wish to see anyone herself either. However, they didn't hear even the slightest of sounds once they walked out. Not a single soul was in sight since it was already late at night by now. This made Guan Qinghan relax somewhat. But then, her shame and embarrassment welled up again since she was being carried by Jun Moxie. Her ear was stuck to his chest. So, she could listen to his heartbeat. And she couldn't help but become confused at hearing his palpitating heartbeat. Jun Moxie dropped her back, and was driven out of her tent after that. He smiled bitterly as he returned to his tent. Then, he started to circulate his aura through his body in order to recover his strength as quickly as possible. However, his skills had evolved, and his aura had become purer. Thus, he had managed to recover his strength in less than 1 hour. The young master stood up and moved about a bit. He then stretched his limbs a bit and murmured, Today's events seem like a dream. I can't tell if this was a traceless illusion. His body then suddenly disappeared from the tent. Jun Moxie hadn't forgotten that he still had a promise to fulfill. One should never break a promise. And one should never commit to a promise they will break. The Bear King Big Bear and Crane King Long Crane did everything in their power to help deal with the Shui Han manor. So, I still have to complete my end of the agreement. And tonight is my last chance to settle my debt. Naturally, this was also an opportunity to enhance his personal influence as well. Jun Moxie didn't like owing a debt to anyone irrespective of whether it was an emotional debt or a monetary one. And he particularly didn't like being indebted to someone who had acted first and had done their best to accomplish their part. The matter had developed into a big one. In fact, it had gone beyond everyone's control. However, they had done this because they had made a commitment. So, Jun Moxie couldn't break his promise either. Moreover, the elimination of the Shui Han manor had come as the removal of a huge threat. Guan Qing Han was his woman now, and the Shui Han manor had been destroyed. This had obviously led Jun Moxie to feel more refreshed. You dare try to snatch my woman? You're fecking dead. Therefore, he had recovered his strength with full speed, and had then unleashed the yin-yang escape to its full capacity to rush towards Tian Fa. An alarmed voice sounded around 150 meters away as his shadow disappeared. What's going on? How did that brat disappear so suddenly? His speed is so astonishingly quick that it surpassed my perception. Then, another person spoke up. Why does elder sister care about it? So what if that brat's speed is exceedingly fast? Everyone from the Jun family is still here. The monk can't run away from the temple. So, why fear that he will run away? The two voices chucked for a while, and became quiet again. The capital Tianxiang City. There had been many big changes since Jun Wuyi had led his army away. And small changes had been pouring in a continuous and never-ending stream. There would be a conflict between two powerful families on one day. And the emperor would have to mediate matters. Then, there would be mediation between two families who were at loggerheads the next day. An announcement of an imperial family suit would follow the day after. In short, the imperial troops were being dispatched in an increasing frequency. Moreover, there had been changes in the official appointments, and His Majesty had been vigorously appointing many young scholars. However, these smaller changes had mostly gone unnoticed since he was using exquisite means to lubricate the entire structure, and had made the changes without making any noise in broad daylight. Consequently, no one had noticed the manner in which he had quietly infiltrated these young scholars into various departments through ordinary means. And then, some rotten officials, or elderly members of some powerful families who weren't at a very senior position were sent away, perhaps with the excuse that they could go back home and enjoy the rest of their years in peace. Not a drop of water had been spilled from this airtight mechanism. It was a seamless and clever method. The number of people affected on an immediate basis weren't a lot. So, not a lot of people seemed to care about it. 3 to 5 people were thrown out one day, then 5 or 6 people would leave the next day, and the next. And this had continued for the entirety of those 2 months. Thus, the imperial polity had been turned on its head, and there had been massive changes. The higher positions of powers were originally held by members of the powerful families. And most of them had still retained their positions. However, many of the people under their command had been replaced with new recruits, or members of other families. This entire thing happened in a very smooth manner. So, the powerful families were caught unaware. They may have wanted to take some countermeasures once they had realized this. However, it was already too late. Therefore, they had been rendered helpless in the face of it. They had been overwhelmed. Moreover, the internal conditions of the powerful families weren't that great either. And that was because there were undercurrents surging inside these families. No one knew who had spread the rumor, but it was said that the young masters who had been sent with Jun Wuyi to the battlefield had been handpicked to gain experience. And it was further said that these young masters would become the choice for successors for their respective families' head post as long as they would return safe and sound. This rumor had quickly given rise to huge waves. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 385. Tang Yuan Strategies. Each powerful family had its own method of dealing with that rumor. The other candidates for the position of the family's lord were quite confident in their abilities. However, this rumor had still left them worried a bit. This rumor had faded away quite quickly, but it had done its job by creating mistrust. Consequently, many people had moved into action. And the frequency of their campaigns had been increasing at a steady rate. Some people knew that the rumor was probably false. But they still intended to take advantage of that opportunity to place their sons, or maybe their fathers, on top. Therefore, they began to scheme in secret as well. These families seemed peaceful on the surface, but violent storms were raging in the dark of secrecy. Everyone was in a hurry. They'd move like the wind in a messy manner. Yet, they were also very cautious for the fear that they'd act carelessly and create a mess. The only families which managed to remain aloof to this situation were the Jun and the Donghua families. The later generations of these two military families weren't present there. Therefore, the existence or absence of such rumors didn't have any effect on them. These families were like a solid block on the inside. Water may be present there, but the container was watertight. The two families weren't affected by these rumors. Therefore, they had maintained their internal stability. However, the same couldn't be said for their military might. And that was because their most trusted military subordinates had been dispersed along with other old officers. Plus, the followers of these two families had also started receiving a treatment that was different from the one that was dished out to the followers of the other families. This was conclusive proof of what was coming. And the two families couldn't get any opportunity to reverse the situation. They had been rendered defenseless as a result. It was almost as if they had been banished. The Murong family, the Meng family, and the Tang family were great families of Tian Xiang. And the elderly of these families were obviously the same as well. However, they'd seem idle and bedridden in the face of this chaos. In fact, the juniors of these families were very respectful and dutiful on the surface. But they were similar to a double-edged sword in secret. Thus, these families had caused a lot of bloodshed. There was another family that had remained considerably calm. And that family was the Li family. But they had the great genius Li Yuan as their eldest young master. So, the other youngsters of the family didn't dare to compete against him. He had used very heavy methods to suppress them early on. Therefore, the rumor of this battle for an heir was the least effective in the Li family. It was only obvious that some major forces had remained unaffected by this gust of wind. For example, the proprietor of the aristocratic hall, Tang Yuan, had ignored these foreign affairs. He had only cared about the advancement of his establishment and earning profits. So, it was becoming increasingly prosperous with every passing day. He had held several auctions and had earned huge pots of gold every time. Jun Moxie had given many effective medicine bottles to Fatty Tang before he had left. And Fatty's method of conducting business was exceptional. He had auctioned the first batch of those medicines, and their results had caused a huge sensation in the capital city. After that, Fatty had started to limit and control the sales. He would only sell 20 pellets of each medicine in one batch. And one individual could only buy a maximum of 5 pellets. Moreover, the reserve price of the auctioned items had continued to increase. However, the number of people who would arrive for these auctions had also continued to increase. The prices of these goods had soon started to reach frighteningly high levels because of their sensational popularity. But the line of people coming to buy these products was still endless. In fact, the customers would be willing to spend to any extent inside the aristocratic hall. And the ones who didn't have hundreds of thousands or millions, were only left to face embarrassment, and would remain tight-lipped as a result. Fatty Tang gave the medicines very pleasant and trendy descriptions as he gave them out. He gave the mysterious Yang Dan a very glorified description. Even the impotent men would have the sturdy strength of 500 kilograms with the help of this thunderous, mysterious Yang Dan. It had almost sounded as if he was offering impotent men an aphrodisiac. In fact, he had said that it would give them much more than that. There was this so-called poem, The Young Buy Wine and Romance. The 50-year-olds settle into their marriage. But even the 80-year-olds' crotches would still seek more. And he gave the missing een pill an even more enchanting name. It improves one's appearance and makes the skin like that of a divine beauty that has maintained the countenance of a flower. Even a little amount of this will change an ugly woman into a beauty who can reverse the flow of a mighty river and move the stars. The missing een pill. Tang Yuan had seemed like a traveling performer who was selling sham when he had given such descriptions to these two medicines. These two extremely trendy, awkward and vulgar-sounding medicines had soon come to be known as the divine pills of the Tianxiang city. The descriptions didn't exactly roll off one's tongues. In fact, they were unreasonable. Most people would stutter at first. However, people soon started to recite these descriptions in a fluent manner. And this was the effect that had been created on the people who hadn't even consumed these medicines. Who knows what would have happened if they had actually consumed these divine pills? Later, Tang Yuan cited that the establishment lacked sufficient manpower. He then used his official authority for private interests, and arranged for his fiancée Sun Xiao Mei to lend him a hand at the aristocratic hall. This left Hai Chenfeng and Song Shang, the two Sky Xian experts, to complain endlessly. The two experts had revolted against Fatty's display of authority several times from the start. Your entire Tang family doesn't have a single Sky Xian expert. Yet, you dare to incite us like this. Who do you think you are? However, Tang Yuan gradually figured a way out. He was dealing with Hai Chenfeng one day, and he simply spoke this line. Third young master said that you'd be the most suitable person for this job. Hai Chenfeng got to work the moment those words exited Tang Yuan's mouth. Moreover, he was sharp, swift, and decisive in his actions. In fact, he seemed afraid of being slow. This left Fatty to reconsider his approach. He was in a similar situation with Song Shang the other day. And he applied the same method with him as well. And the result was the same. Therefore, Tang Yuan assumed authority without proper pretext from that day onwards, and started to act in a tyrannical manner. I don't think anything of who I am. I'm only elder brother Mo Xie's spokesperson in Tianxiang. I merely handle elder brother Mo Xie's affairs. You obey whatever I'm telling you. Otherwise, I'll tell elder brother Mo Xie about you. This resulted in one thing: the two Sky Xian experts fled whenever they saw the fatty. They'd never come face to face with him. I can't refuse him. But that doesn't mean that I can't avoid him, right? However, Fatty Tang had a strategy to deal with this as well. He stipulated that they must come to the aristocratic hall once a day. And he assigned them an office each. He would stick a 3-meter wide paper sign on the entrance in case he wanted to assign them some task. And that paper would inevitably start in the following manner: the third young master has said. And then there was the young Prince Yang Mo. Tang Yuan obviously wouldn't allow him to sit idle either. The little prince had given them a huge amount of money when the establishment had opened. And this had left the money-strapped Tang Yuan to pile praises on Jun Moxie for garnering such valuable support. After all, that money had arrived in a very timely fashion. However, the aristocratic hall was trying to make more gold at this time. But the prince's mansion had merely stretched its hand in wait for their share of the money. Tang Yuan had obviously been left to feel seething pain because of this. So he started to cuss about it every day. I run and deal with everything until I run myself ragged every day, like a monkey, only to provide for these freeloaders. Tang Yuan had obviously forgotten his roots by now. Moreover, he had forgotten the challenges they had faced in the beginning, and the family which had financially supported his organization when he had needed it the most. So he could only see his hard-earned money flowing out like gurgling like a stream at this time. And he'd feel as if he were losing a part of his flesh. Tang Yuan's hand would tremble every month when he gave out the shares in profits. In fact, his eyes would become red, and his flesh would start to twist. The third young master has done all this. So this belongs to him. You just come here to rest and have sweets, you brat. Yet you also get the money. And so much of it at that. Why? Thus, Fatty Tang's mind was in a complete disequilibrium. Moreover, Tang Yuan was determined to deal with all troubles even if Jun Moxie hadn't specifically asked him to. However, little Yang Mo had several aunts and uncles. And they were obviously princesses and princes. Some of them arrived one day by a matter of chance. Tang Yuan had obviously rolled his eyes at this. However, little Yang Mo wasn't able to do much when Tang Yuan rolled his eyes at their arrival during the auctions. More members of the royal family. This business is only meant to benefit them. Who doesn't want more of them here? The little boy didn't seem to have any feeling of self-respect in the beginning. So he obviously suffered many losses. Moreover, Tang Yuan wouldn't divide the shares in a proper manner. He'd calculate the share in profits. Then, he'd deduct any losses the aristocratic hall would suffer due to the royal family from the prince's share. You have to pay on behalf of the royal family. In any case, your self-respect isn't worth the money. And then, finally, that shy little boy eventually started to become anxious for the sake of his own interests. The little boy would look at the daily transactions of the aristocratic hall. The money was crashing in through the door. In fact, that pile of paper money had soared to the sky. However, he could only stare blankly at it since none of it belonged to him. Sometimes he'd even do some accounting. But he'd come to realize that he was losing money instead of making it. Who could ever bear such an intolerable thing? Therefore, the little boy became clever and alert. He wouldn't yield even a little money. In fact, he had soon started to haggle over every coin. He almost resembled a little rooster from a cockfighting match at times. In fact, he soon started pulling an occasional trick or two of his own. I could get some extra rewards if an elder from the royal family visits the hall. I'm only a child. So, making them get me something small wouldn't be out of the question, right? However, the royal intermediaries were good at sweet-talking as well. So it was only natural that contradictions would occur. But the little boy would remain strict and impartial. He would give priority to the money above everything else. In fact, even the boy's father would have collapsed on the spot if he had seen the manner in which his little son had started to talk. The princes, the members of the royal harem, and their intermediaries soon started to find it increasingly difficult to take advantage of the aristocratic hall upon their visits. In fact, members of the three princes' factions were the worst off. Consequently, the three princes got extremely angry and decided to visit the establishment themselves. They had obviously arrived with the intent of inflicting losses to the little boy. And the little boy ended up suffering losses after losses. How could a small arm ever twist a big leg? Moreover, 3 pairs of fully grown legs. Then, Tang Yuan and Song Shang made an evil plan one day. And they filled the little boy's cup with wine at the evening banquet. The young boy was very striking to the eye, but his capacity to drink wasn't striking to say the least. Moreover, he was very anxious at that time. He was pained, and couldn't help but recall what his elder brother Jun Moxie had said to him in this moment of helplessness. Your father isn't the emperor. How can I help you? Helping you will mean going against the emperor's son. And that's the same as going against the future emperor. Will I be allowed to live if I did that? There's a so-called saying, wine won't get the anxious drunk, but it got him drunk. Moreover, the young boy had gotten completely drunk. In fact, he was sloshed. And he started to chant in his drunken stupor. Wine obviously didn't suit him. In fact, it nearly made his crazy. Moreover, the intoxication didn't allow him to sleep properly. So, he got out of the bed at night and shouted loudly in his childish voice, I want to become the emperor. Feck. I fecking want to become the emperor. I will revolt. I want to be an emperor so that my children don't have to get bullied. He was a young boy at this time. However, he had already figured that his son would have to face bullying someday. One could say that the boy had surpassed Dugu Xiaoyi's levels. That shouting in the middle of the night scared Tang Yuan. So much so that he soiled his pants. However, he didn't dare to intervene for the fear that some outsider could have been listening to this in the middle of the night. In fact, Tang Yuan had been terrified to such an extent that he was more likely to forget his own surname than this night. This is a crime worthy of a family's extermination. Tang Yuan suddenly decided that he would never get that little boy drunk. I will get others drunk. Maybe I'll get drunk myself. But getting this kid drunk can put my life at risk as well. It's too dang risky. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 386. Enters Tian Fa for the 3rd time. Inside the imperial palace. The emperor frowned. His dignified face looked gloomy. He paced back and forth for a while. His pace was neither too slow nor too fast. And he eventually let out a long sigh. The emperor's expression was that of confusion. He seemed to be stuck at an important decision. In fact, it appeared as if he had been facing a complex problem. Several powerful Xianqi experts had announced their support for the Jun family. And this list now included that very powerful and mysterious master as well. This matter had struck the emperor's heart and had kept him awake day and night. How much truth do you think there is to this matter, elder brother Yuan? He had received this amazing news some time ago. In fact, many people had confirmed it. But the emperor still couldn't believe it. However, the fact was that he didn't wish to believe it. Elder brother Yuan, Jun family had suffered a major tragedy 12 years ago. We must consider that those tragedies couldn't have happened if such a person had stood behind the Jun family this entire time. Jun Wu Hui and Jun Wu Meng wouldn't have died, and Jun Wu Yi wouldn't have become a cripple. Moreover, the Jun family's 3rd generation wouldn't have had only one surviving child. And that's because the Silver Blizzard City wouldn't have dared to do anything. Therefore, I'm convinced that something is odd about this matter. The emperor frowned as he continued. But don't you think that it's merely weird? Don't you think that it's only an act by the Jun family to neutralize the intentions of those who wish to prey on them? So, has this been done with the intention to give the Jun family an opportunity to flourish? This would prevent the deaths of Jun Moxie's generation, to say the least. Mr. Wen's face had lost its calm and tranquil demeanor a long while ago. He sat with a serious expression at the moment, and it was evident that he was pondering over something. This entity is a supposed to be peerless expert first of all. He is rumored to be a once-in-a-generation expert. So, why hasn't there been a legend about him if he has existed in the world of the mortals for many years? Moreover, it's impossible for such an expert to emerge in such a short while. Secondly, this man is supposed to be a towering and peerless master who existed from 10 to 20 years ago. So, he should have had an awe-inspiring aura. And it wouldn't have been very difficult to believe if this person had hailed from a force that was at the level of the Silver Blizzard City or the Shui Han Manor. However, the Jun family is nowhere near at par with them. So, this matter seems very confusing. Third, such a tragedy wouldn't have occurred if he had genuinely watched over the Jun family. And finally, the most important part, this mysterious master may have been away for a long time. Therefore, he may not have been aware of the tragedies that had happened to the Jun family. However, he still didn't take any action even though he has reappeared. Any person would have found those things to be intolerable. First, this person doesn't show himself in the past 10 years. After that, he only killed Li Ju Tian. But he still allowed the Silver Blizzard City's men to live. He even spared the Xiao family's men. This is very unreasonable. After all, Xiao Buyu had forced the Dongfang family to take a very humiliating oath. Moreover, Jun Wuyi and Xiao Han have always had an irreconcilable hatred for each other. Every grievance has someone responsible for it. And there is a debtor for every debt. These words have some truth to them. But we know that Jun Wuyi's legs were disabled and haven't been healed since. So, how could he take revenge? There's no chance of him taking revenge. But whatever that man has said and done in this matter becomes even more inexplicable if we deny those words of his. So, this matter has many layers where confusions exist. His Majesty frowned as he paced about and pondered. Your Majesty, there's a good possibility that this information has some truth to it. Mr. Wen spoke up in a serious manner. So, I request Your Majesty to consider this. Most people present at the time of that mysterious man's appearance were under Li Ju Tian's influence. And Li Ju Tian didn't get along with the Jun family. And most of the families present at that scene had conspired to entrap Jun Wuyi into throwing away his life. So, why would they wish to fake such news? Moreover, pulling off an act in front of exceptional people like the Lord of Tian Fa and the provosts from the elusive world of immortals is impossible. Your Majesty's misgivings are naturally very reasonable. However, I believe that the sole reasonable explanation for this rests in the angle that the Jun family may have somehow gotten the support of such a capable person in recent times. It could be similar to how they managed to get the 8th Great Master Solitary Falcon's support. It's only that this person's strength is even more formidable. Mr. Wen then continued in a serious tone. It doesn't matter if this support is recent, or has been there for a while. But this man genuinely exists. And there's no doubt about it. That's true. I had figured that it was a facade. And nothing more than that. But that seems impossible at this time. So, we need to determine how the imperial court shall treat the Jun family from now onwards. The emperor let out a deep sigh. The dark line on his forehead visibly denoted his worries as he looked into the distance. His state of mind wasn't clear. The ruler of the Tian Xiang Empire had already acknowledged the existence of that mysterious man. However, it seemed that he was waiting for someone to tell him that the matter was merely a huge facade. The Jun family, the current relationship with the Jun family might not be what your majesty considers. In fact, it might be considered to be very harmonious by some. Mr. Wen spoke. And the Jun family's newly acquired support may not have to be a bad thing for your majesty and the empire. All you have to do is maintain your current relationship with them. Then, you can attempt to win them over. That Jun Tian isn't the kind of man who will forget old favors and friendships, nor will he forget the emotions therein. Not a bad thing. The emperor smiled bitterly and muttered in a low voice. Jun Tian isn't a man who will forget past favors and friendships. It wasn't known why he had repeated what Mr. Wen had spoken, but his tone had sounded eccentric and eerie. Mr. Wen was startled as he looked at the emperor's face. It was as motionless as a lake's water. He couldn't see any emotions on it. There had been traces of gloominess on it before, but that had also disappeared at this time. However, Mr. Wen also felt that His Majesty was suppressing his deep and heartfelt emotions. Then, a strong wind suddenly blew through the window. A memorandum that was placed on the table was blown away by this gust. It floated about for a moment, and eventually fell to the ground. A page had been blown open from it. It read, Jun Xie is returning safely with the army from the battle at the southern Heaven City. A mysterious man had appeared at the scene. And not one of the thousands of men dared to disobey him even though he had acted haughtily. He killed the great master Li Ju Tian with merely a turn of his hand. After that, he proclaimed for the Jun family. The man destroyed the Shui Han Manor, and he also made the Silver Blizzard City. Even the Lord of Tian Fa didn't dare to call out to him. The two provosts from the elusive world of immortals didn't dare to move either. After that, the voluminous writing became extremely detailed. Mr. Wen's vision got affixed at a set of words. Not one of the thousands of men dared to disobey him even though he had acted haughtily. He killed the great master Li Ju Tian with merely a turn of his hand. After that, he proclaimed for the Jun family. The man destroyed the Shui Han Manor, and he also made the Silver Blizzard City. Even the Lord of Tian Fa didn't dare to call out to him. The two provosts from the elusive world of immortals didn't dare to move either. What could be the identity of such a skilled person? Mr. Wen narrowed his eyes and looked upwards as he pondered deeply. That matter at Tian Fa had only taken place 3 days ago. And yet, the emperor had already received this secret information. This message had reached here even faster than an eagle that was flying at full speed. The Jun family household. Jun Tian had become a recluse ever since his son and nephew had gone to war. In fact, he hadn't even appeared in public ever since. Old Pang hurried over with his bamboo cane and reported, My lord. The secret report from the southern Heaven City. Jun Tian's eyes opened wide as he stood up and said, I want to read it. Bring it to me. He hurriedly took the report. His arm had started to tremble somewhat. The face of the old man who had received many urgent military reports in the past was calm. In fact, there was no movement on it. But he was scared inside. In fact, he was nearly on the edge. Only old Pang knew that Jun Tian hadn't slept properly for 2 months since Jun Xie had gone to battle along with his nephew. In fact, he hadn't even had a single night of proper sleep. Jun Tian read this secret report very quickly at first. He then discovered that he had overlooked the real message in that secret report. So, he started to read it again, more carefully this time, word by word, sentence by sentence. His taut body finally relaxed as he sat down on the chair. Wu Yi is all right. And even Mo Xia is all right. They're returning triumphant. Jun Tian tried to control his happiness. He sounded calm and indifferent, but his brows were enough to determine that he was very happy. It's just that Xie will follow his mother's brothers, and he will go to the Dongfang family for a little while. This was requested by Dongfang Wenqin. This is indeed great news, my lord. Old Pang was genuinely happy. Jun Tian's face wrinkled and blossomed as he smiled and replied, "It's indeed great. The Dongfang family had been very good to our Jun family in those days. Xie is very heroic, and his wit is also commendable. Wu Hui's in-laws must have become very fond of him after having met him." The secret report had been issued from Tian Fa 3 days ago. However, it didn't inform the grandfather that his commendable and treasured grandson had done something earth-shattering. This matter was like a level 8 earthquake, or level 9 tsunami for the Jun family. The old man would grab a stick to break that youngster's legs if he came to know about it. Jun Moxie was entering the Tian Fa forest for the 3rd time at this moment. He had taken Tian Fa's sacred fruit the first time he had entered the forest. The second time had been during the battle. He had transformed into his formless mode, and had spoken a few words of instruction to Big Bear. And he was gracing the Tian Fa again for the 3rd time now. The young Master Jun felt that the Tian Fa forest was the best place for him. This was where he felt at ease the most. In fact, he wouldn't even leave if it were possible. This was the only place where he could somewhat loosen up. Young Master Jun was moving like flash of light. He knew from experience that the Xian beasts of Tian Fa wouldn't be at the edge of the forest. The Tian Fa forest covered a huge area. And Jun Moxie didn't know where the epicenter of the forest would be. He had collected rare herbs for medicines like a locust the last time he had been there. But he knew that if the increasing concentration density of these herbs were to be put on a map, it would form a straight line. And this straight line would go to the core of Tian Fa. However, he was a long distance away from that central region at this time. Jun Moxie had swept through the area, and hadn't left anything unplucked in his path. But it was still merely a drop in the ocean. However, this also meant that he was at a loss in this case, since he could only track the location of the top herbs in Tian Fa. He had obviously penetrated very deep into the Tian Fa once before. But his overall knowledge of the forest's road map was very poor. Therefore, it would be very difficult for him to find someone in this vast territory. Consequently, the young Master Jun was forced to rely on his memory alone, and decided to proceed towards the spot where he had interacted with them the first time had been here. The range of Jun Moxie's spiritual sense had also increased with the progress of his cultivation. So, he put his powerful spiritual sense to use, and quickly located the spot where he had last met the Crane and Bear Kings. Everything around the 10,000 Poison Valley seemed bleak. The young master hadn't gone very deep into the valley, but he didn't need to. His powerful spiritual sense was enough to determine that the Crane King and the Bear King weren't present there. In fact, even the Snake King wasn't there at this time. The young master was in no mood to look for them, since it wouldn't be an easy task. Anyway, it would be a lot easier to make them locate him instead. Jun Moxie revealed himself in the Tian Fa forest. Then, he abruptly flew into the sky. After that, he pushed forth the formidable aura from the Hongjun Pagoda. The pure aura pushed forth from his body, and rushed out. Then, it spread in the area around him. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 387. Bear and Crane Kings. This was undoubtedly a signal. In fact, it was an explosive signal. There was no room for a mistake since he had sent his signal forth. Big Bear and Long Crane would surely come to meet him as long as they were in the Tian Fa forest. The Crane King and the Bear King were sitting in the very depths of the forest, and were drinking wine. Long Crane's mind was cautious as usual. But Big Bear was enjoying and living in the moment. He was having a typical, the monkey takes over when there's no tiger in the forest moment. I'm the boss since the eldest isn't present here. Therefore, he had dragged Long Crane for some drinks, and this had been continuing for 2 full days by now. He didn't even care about what had happened in Tian Fa over the past few days, or what they would have to face in the future. This simple-minded temperament was entirely different from that of Jun Moxie's, but it somehow managed to yield the same results. The 2 beast kings weren't drinking in their human forms at that moment. Rather, they were drinking that sea of alcohol in their original forms. On one side was a huge bear covered in golden fur. In fact, it almost resembled a mountain. The Crane King's original form was one of a red-crowned crane. His body was even bigger, and was covered in white feathers. And his eyes resembled 2 flaming torches. There was a gigantic natural platform in front of these 2 beast kings. They seemed to be using it as table. Wine cups carved out of red sandalwood trees had been placed on this table of theirs. And each of these cups was as big as a large barrel of wine. And the wine that these 2 beast kings were drinking gave off an exceptionally nostril-assailing fragrance. In fact, it was the monkey folk of the Tian Fa forest which had brewed that monkey wine. And these 2 beast kings had used their position to procure this wine. The massive mouth of a bear opened along with the giant beak of a crane, and they rapidly drained the wine down their throats. Third, I've noticed that you're becoming increasingly cautious. In fact, your caution has crossed every boundary. And you're particularly worried about that matter regarding our sacred fruit. I think that it's useless for you to get so worried. Big Bear's eyes had gone out of focus due to the intoxication. He patted his golden fur-covered chest and vomited out the words, I don't get it. You've been worrying the entire day. How are you not tired? It was obvious that Long Crane was very worried about the entire matter surrounding the Tian Fa's sacred fruit. However, Big Bear didn't care about it. He was very confident when it came to that mysterious master. His intuition was telling him that a person with such a high cultivation level wouldn't see any need to cheat them. Therefore, he couldn't understand Long Crane's anxiousness. In fact, he even despised it somewhat. Your brain is full of muscle, Big Bear. What would you know? Long Crane turned and raised his eyelid to look at Big Bear with his huge ruby-like eyes. We need to worry since there's a chance that everything may go wrong. How would you and I bail ourselves out if we don't see that man's shadow again? That bear brain of yours is too small and muddled. Anyone can cheat it with ease. The second brother was negligent and gambled foolishly. Now, he has to serve others. You're also behaving like that. And you won't get a chance to run either. Big Bear remained silent for a moment. He then said in a low voice, Third brother, I believe in that mysterious master. Moreover, I feel that the risk of using the sacred fruit is too great for us. There's always the danger that our body might explode. In fact, the success rate hasn't even reached 30% in the past. And it seems like that skilled and mysterious person possesses a method which doesn't involve any risks. So, it's worth the wait and the risk. Long Crane stared blankly after he heard Big Bear's words. He had never expected that his fourth brother, that ignorant Big Bear, could put forth an argument that would seem so reasonable. I had never considered that you could make such arguments. Fourth brother. This is a genuine case of even a fool gives wise counsel once in a while. I genuinely respect you for those words. Big Bear felt very happy when he heard those words. But he then finished 3 or 4 glasses in one breath and said, "What? A fool gives wise counsel once in a while. This beast king has always been intelligent. I never open my mouth without giving things a thought." Long Crane couldn't help but smile after he heard Big Bear's boast. In fact, he was going to raise a toast when he suddenly recalled something. "How did you have the courage to address me like that? Who did you call third brother a moment ago? I'm your third elder brother. Is there no basic sense of respect left between seniors and juniors anymore?" I had barely spoken those words of praise. And you forgot the basic courtesy? Anyway, you may have made a reasonable argument. But this matter it is still too risky. After all, the sacred fruit not being in our hands is still not a good thing. Big Bear snorted and replied, "What risks? Isn't it risky to have the sacred fruit by ourselves? And no one has ever been able to steal our sacred fruit. It has never happened since ancient times. And it won't happen now either. Do you want to make a bet?" Long Crane rolled his red eyes. He didn't seem to be in a good mood. "When will you drop this bad habit of making bets? Don't forget that second brother is someone else's mount because he had made a bet. And I see a similar trend with you. Besides, what can the two of us bet on? Both of us will be slitting our throats if we don't find that man. You want to bet on that?" "Bet, my ****. Big Bear's anger flared. And he shouted as he got up. "I really love betting. Right? So, I will make a bet with you that that person isn't the bad guy you say he is." Long Crane snorted. And replied in a salty and strong manner, "Not that kind of a man." "Are you sure?" He should have honored his commitment and kept his promise since that Shui Han manor has been turned to dust. Let's not talk about whether he can keep his promise about giving us the pills in exchange for our TFA's sacred fruit. He should have at least helped us break through the level 10 Xian beast barrier as he had promised. So, why did he disappear even though we had come to an agreement? Perhaps he has been delayed by another matter? Such a skilled person wouldn't be so shameless. Right? Big Bear's tone had sounded very confident a moment ago. However, it had suddenly collapsed. In fact, he seemed to have lost some of his confidence by now. "Are you sure that a very skilled person won't be shameless?" Long Crane sighed and said, "There are many in the human race who are treacherous. How many of them would care about a single promise? You are still very naive. Big Bear. Does great intelligence appear stupidity to you? You have fooled yourself." Big Bear snorted and vigorously grabbed a cup of wine. He then tilted his head and gulped its contents down with an askance look on his face. It was evident that he couldn't bear with Long Crane's caution. He was about to refute when he suddenly felt an earth-shattering power push forth through Tian. Big Bear suddenly trembled. Even his hands started to tremble as he threw that big cup of wine with a bang. He then jumped up and spoke up in an exceptionally excited manner. "It's him. He's looking for us. He's here to help us break through. What do you have to say about that, Third Crane?" Long Crane's face also lit up with delight. In fact, he had even forgotten to notice the Third Crane remark. The Beast King flew up with an explosive sound. His wings glittered as he shouted, "You have won the bet. Fourth. He has arrived." The two Beast Kings looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with rapt ecstasy. Big Bear was evidently unwillingly to wait for even a single moment. He shouted and jumped onto Long Crane's back. After that, he shouted loudly as he pointed his finger forward, "Hurry up and take off." His tone was decisive. In fact, it was like an order. But Long Crane wasn't prepared for his thousands of kilograms of weight, and was pushed down as a result. He obviously wasn't able to take off. In fact, he fell to the ground. He then rebuked in an indignant tone, "Shameless. Don't ever jump onto me in this bare form of yours. Don't you know that you weigh 1.5 tons? However, he didn't feel any change by the time he finished speaking. So, he added more words. "Hurry up and get down. I'm your third brother, not your saddled mount. Run on your own." Big Bear grabbed 2 of Long Crane's feathers and didn't let go. Then, he quickly transformed to his human form, but he shamelessly refused to come down. Long Crane felt helpless. And he also feared to delay at such a crucial moment. So, he flapped his wings and took off. Then, he rushed forward like lightning. He quickly charged towards the direction this enormous pressure was originating from. Jun Moxie was standing in midair. He could feel the Xian beasts cower under his extremely formidable power. None of them had dared to make a move. I'm sure that there aren't many Xian beasts who can withstand this. Strong winds and thunder arose in the distance. This was accompanied by a huge silhouette which was flying over. It was Big Bear riding atop Long Crane. The scene looked as awe-inspiring as the ones from the mythical legends of the Dragon Knights. Jun Moxie remained in the air until Long Crane transformed into his human form and both the Beast Kings landed on the ground. Then, young Master Jun also floated down with a feather-like swiftness. "Senior, you came." Long Crane felt somewhat embarrassed. He had called him elder brother Feng that time in the Tian city. But he was already calling him senior now. In fact, the 2 Beast Kings felt somewhat depressed since they had previously dared to consider him of their rank and generation. Moreover, they had doubted this person only moments ago. Therefore, Long Crane felt a bit embarrassed since this person had appeared in front of him at this time. Ahem. I was about to leave the Southern Heaven City. But I suddenly recalled that I still owed you a promise. A man is nothing without his credibility. So, how could I leave before repaying you for the past favors? Jun Moxie gave a detailed account. He sounded magnificent by contrast. Ka. Senior is genuinely a trustworthy person. Third Crane was worried that you won't come. He felt that you were likely to run away like a thief. But I strongly reprimanded him. You have learned of your mistake. Isn't that right, Third Crane? Ha. Big Bear felt very proud of himself. And he had drawn back the corners of his big mouth since he felt happy about winning the bet. How could he not feel proud of himself? This man had shown up and had displayed his importance to his commitment. How could he steal the sacred fruit and leave? That matter with those pills can't be a trick either, right? Consequently, Big Bear had laid down everything that had been weighing on his mind. You donghua bear. What rubbish are you talking? How can I not have faith in the senior? Long Crane became very angry. His fingers started to tremble. He wanted to strangle Big Bear. He had never expected that Big Bear would betray him in order to win a favor with the person in front of them. No harm done. That was only natural. Jun Moxie chuckled and smiled. He didn't know why, but he felt very cheerful whenever he'd face those 2 Beast Kings. This wasn't a pleasure he derived from acting like a pretentious jerk in front of them. Rather, this was derived from the comfort he felt since he didn't need to analyze any schemes when he dealt with them. Those Xian beast kings of the Tian Fa forest were simple and pure when compared to humans. And this atmosphere made Jun Moxie feel relaxed. He felt at ease since he was far away from that endless deception and scheming. Ahem. I've come here to keep my promise. First, I need you two to prepare yourselves. I want you to calm your aura and bring your conditions to the very optimum. What's most important is that you two bring your mental state to its most peaceful. And I will first have a look at the borders for your breakthrough. Jun Moxie smiled. He hadn't realized that he was being very amiable. In fact, he would rarely be seen like this, except for when he was with Grandpa Jun, his third uncle, and a very few other people. Long Crane and Big Bear perceived that faintly amiable aura around him very clearly. So, they also started to trust him completely. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 388. Help the Beast King with the breakthrough. The Xian beasts came in different shapes and sizes. However, they were still beasts at the end of the day. So, there had always been somewhat of a barrier between them and humanity since ancient times. In fact, they were starkly juxtaposed from the human world. Therefore, there was one formidable land outside the 3 holy lands. In fact, there would have been 4 holy lands instead of 3 if it weren't for the existence of this difference. However, the level of their strength far transcended that of the apex-ranked humans. So, how could an ordinary human compare with them? Jun Moxie had emanated that faintly amiable feeling. It was very faint, but it had come from the heart. And the Xian beasts were very sensitive to the feelings of likes and dislikes. So, they had sensed it, and had found it very pleasant. Long Crane and Big Bear genuinely felt that the person in front of them was truly amicable and trustworthy. Therefore, they looked at Jun Moxie with extreme gratitude, and didn't hesitate as they sat down cross-legged. It didn't take long for that strong smell of wine to evaporate from their bodies. Consequently, their previously red faces resumed to their normal color. Big Bear felt that his aura was flowing free and unrestrained. He was in a very peaceful frame of mind. The Beast King was about to open his eyes when he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. This hand then moved to the vital point of his shoulder as a soft voice instructed, "Stabilize your minds. Don't move. Long Crane, you must keep watch. No one must disturb this process." Then, Big Bear removed all the defenses from his mind for the first time in his life. And his entire chi structure was exposed to the explorations of that person's hand. In fact, this was also the first time that Big Bear had become so unreserved and had put such an enormous amount of trust in a human. Long Crane complied, and quietly slipped out. And he started to watch the surroundings very attentively for any activity. This was supposed to be their territory, but Long Crane still acted like it was ruled by a great enemy. He was extremely vigilant. Because this breakthrough was very important for Big Bear and him. Big Bear's eyes were closed, and he could only feel a cool sensation on his shoulder. In fact, it felt as if it was wintertime. Then, he suddenly felt something similar to ice-cold water pour onto his shoulder. This feeling then seeped to his bones. He could feel the pure aura bubble out from that hand and pour into him. In fact, it was flowing out like a river. And that river had started to irrigate his meridians. His meridians had already reached a critical point. In fact, they had attained the peak of a beast king's strength. But they were then edged on by the pure aura they received, and started to enliven, bit by bit. After that, the meridians began to accept the aura, and eventually started to expand a little. This is so fast. It is an astonishing progress. And it is so effective. Big Bear was astonished by this, and his immediate reaction was one of admiration. But he still didn't dare to allow even the slightest of chaos to seep into his mind. Instead, he made a great effort to guide the flow of that powerful external aura through his internal cultivation structure. And it started to trickle into his dantian little by little. Long Crane was standing around 30 feet away when he found that Big Bear's body had suddenly started to emit a faint milky white mist. And it was becoming denser with every passing moment. In fact, the mist continued to become more and more concentrated until the big and sturdy body of Big Bear had been enshrouded in it. This is an unworldly aura. In fact, this is the sign of someone being on the verge of breaking through to the 10th level. How could he reach breakthrough so quickly? How's this possible? Long Crane cried out in alarm. In fact, the Crane King was subconsciously rubbing his eyes since he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. A miracle is happening in front of me. An incredible miracle. The mysterious person had promised to help them with their breakthrough. However, Long Crane had assumed this entire matter differently. The man may sincerely try to help, and he may even possess some extremely remarkable method. However, he had figured that the best result would an increase in their cultivation which would take them to the critical point in fell swoop. So, he had felt that the two of them would have to endure bitter hardships and painstaking practice before they'd eventually break through to a higher level. He had considered that scenario as the best possible conclusion to this. However, Long Crane could have never imagined that this mysterious and skilled person would use his powerful aura to help them in breaking through the bottleneck without a pause, and that too in the blink of an eye. What does this mean? What does this signify? This meant that this mysterious black-clothed man was willing to sacrifice his own strength for them. He had gone through bitter hardship, and had traveled across the world to help these two brothers. Long Crane's eyes quickly became somewhat moist. We had wagered an insignificant task in exchange of this. What would such a task be in the eyes of such a peerless person? And this mysteriously skilled person has still fulfilled his promise. In fact, he's even sacrificing his own strength for it. How many people in history have honored their promises with such seriousness? How could such people ever be untrustworthy? How could anyone still doubt that this person would cheat us and run away with the sacred fruit? That would be a huge joke. It's important to know that this mysterious person could easily kill the two beast kings in one move since they had lowered their guards. And he would have gained top-tier Xian cores of beast kings who were on the verge of breaking through to the 10th level. Moreover, he wouldn't have had to expend any energy for doing this. It would have been a great procurement for him, and it would have surely been very advantageous for his cultivation as well. However, he didn't do it. Instead, that man complied with the agreement. In fact, he was even sacrificing his strength to help the two beast kings with their breakthrough. Long Crane asked himself if he would have sacrificed his strength to help Big Bear with his breakthrough. And he became red with shame after he had carefully considered the possibility for a while. And that was because he had come up with a clear subconscious answer: no. I'm not willing to make that sacrifice for my own brother, let alone other people. This black-clothed mysterious person deserved the admiration of everyone around the world. Any friend of his would feel reassured, fearless, and honored. Jun Moxie would have become giddy with happiness if had gotten to know what the two beast kings were thinking at this time. In fact, he would have fainted, and still woken up giddy. Moreover, that cycle would have continued for several iterations. The obviously seemed to be a big misunderstanding. Jun Moxie was obviously serious about his promise. And he had genuinely expended a massive amount of extremely pure aura. But he wasn't sacrificing his own strength to help the two with their breakthrough. In fact, the young Master Jun would have never agreed to this deal if he would have had to do such a thing. He had never been a great and towering hero. So, how could he ever do such a great and altruistic deed? The reason was obvious. The Xian beasts of Tian Fa regarded this pure aura to be extremely valuable. In fact, they valued it far more than the young Master Jun. Moreover, the quantity of aura inside the Hongjun pagoda was very large for Jun Moxie. In fact, it was nearly inexhaustible. He was increasingly absorbing more and more aura with the increase in his cultivation. However, he wouldn't feel the need to worry about its scarcity. Using the Hongjun pagoda to help the Xian beast kings with their breakthrough was nothing to Jun Moxie. In fact, it was almost as if a man with a mountain of gold the size of the Great Himalayas was trying to flaunt his wealth in front of everyday office-goers. Such a person could easily give everyone a few gold coins and seem generous as he'd say, "It's nothing. Go and have fun with it." The scale of the assistance he was lending was something similar. Moreover, Big Bear and Long Crane were simple and honest creatures. And this was to Jun Moxie's liking. Therefore, he was willing to help them. And getting to the heart of the matter, helping them out would still carry many benefits for him. These two weren't ordinary individuals. In fact, both of them were easily equal to some of the great master. So, extending a hand of friendship to them would bring no harm. It is often said that it's more than enough to have only one friend who is willing to help you in the need of hour. But how could anyone dislike having more of such friends? I've received a lot of quick help from these guys. And I've obtained the 1,000 evil and 10,000 poisons fruit from them. I've also collected so many other rare herbs from their forest. This had left Jun Moxie to feel that he had done nothing for them in comparison. In fact, he even felt a little guilty. The young Master Jun would never consider himself a good man, but he still had some conscience. Therefore, he felt extremely bad. I haven't done much for them when I compare it to what they have done for me. However, the two beast kings felt the same way. In fact, their sentiment was 100 times stronger than Jun Moxie's. He's genuinely an exceptional man. Big Bear sighed in his heart. He had been emotionally moved by this. Suddenly, he felt that the energy circulation inside his dantian had started to become increasingly urgent. In fact, it had soon taken the form of a whirlpool. And that heavenly aura had become exceptionally frenetic in a split second. The aura amassed. He went past that critical point without stopping, and attained his breakthrough with an explosion. Big Bear's state of mind was very tense, and he didn't allow his mind to wander. He spared no efforts, and gave his all to push through his meridians. The forceful aura coming from that hand had started to feel warm. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard. In fact, this sound was loud enough to shake a mountain. Bang! The thick mist that had surrounded Big Bear suddenly disappeared. Then, there was a loud noise. However, no one would figure its origin. But it had left everyone's heart to tremble. It was indeed a very mysterious feeling. Jun Moxie's body suddenly flashed. He appeared 10 feet away, and stood beside Long Crane. His black hood was somewhat moist. And his body was shuddering lightly. It seemed to Long Crane that he was about to collapse. Long Crane felt very gratefully at this time, and he was about to speak up. Then, he saw Jun Moxie put his finger in front of his mouth in an indication that he needed to remain silent. Jun Moxie then said, "He has just made a breakthrough. How could a beast king like Long Crane not know that?" His very soul had been shaken a moment ago. And he had immediately realized that Big Bear had finally broken through. Big Bear's post-breakthrough strength was easily equal to that of the second great master, Li Ju Tian. In fact, it might even have transcended that. Big Bear unconsciously let out a loud and vigorous screech at first. Then, there was a flash of a golden light. In fact, this dazzling light painted the ground in its color as it spread out. After that, Big Bear's body started to rise in front of these two individuals even though there was no wind. Then, there was a loud bone-crunching sound. In fact, the echoes of that explosive sound reached the very soul. Many similar explosions were heard thereafter. And this was followed by a very loud sound. Bang! The accumulated strength inside Big Bear's body had finally broken out. And his majestic body had also been lowered from midair. He now had the body of a magnificent, fierce, and tough bear. The golden hair that covered his body suddenly started to turn a deeper shade. In fact, each of his hair seemed to be exuding magnificent splendor. This astonishing phenomenon continued for a while before it came to a stop. The Xian beasts throughout Tian Fa had gone silent. In fact, many of the Xian beast kings had started to tremble with fear. Even their very souls could sense that a formidable entity had arrived in Tian Fa. A real beast king had taken birth. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 389. Many beast kings gather to celebrate with Jun Moxie. Big Bear came down to the ground after a long time passed. He then transformed into his human form again. He seemed very happy as he looked over his body. It seemed as if he was in a dream. A long time passed. However, it seemed as if this dreamlike state of his hadn't come to pass. He examined his body very thoroughly a few times before he finally accepted that he had genuinely made a breakthrough. Big Bear looked upwards and let out a roar. Then, 2 tears rolled down his big eyes. He then took great strides and stood in front of Jun Moxie. After that, he eagerly kneeled. Jun Moxie was startled by this. Consequently, he didn't even get the time to stop Big Bear as he continually knocked his head on the ground. Meanwhile, Big Bear choked with emotion as he spoke. "Thank you, thank you." Long Crane had been standing on the side this entire time, and his eyes had also somewhat reddened. He was also a Xian beast king like Big Bear, and he had also been stuck at the same bottleneck. Therefore, he understood Big Bear's frame of mind. And he also understood why the Bear King was kowtowing. Big Bear had acted like this because that mysterious person had given the two of them a new lease of life. Jun Moxie hurriedly pulled Big Bear to stand upright and said, "What is this for? We had made an agreement. And I was only honoring my commitment. There's no need to do this." Jun Moxie felt somewhat embarrassed as he said this. In fact, he felt as if he was the typical sort of man who took cheap advantages of others. "This isn't that big a deal. I could do this 8 to 10 times a day. And I'd still have room for more." However, Big Bear and Long Crane didn't feel that way. And so, They spoke up with tears in their eyes. This may have been an agreement. And it may not feel much to you, but it means the world to us. In fact, it is similar to receiving a new lease of life. We don't have the words to thank you for this huge favor. The senior can send us on any errand without hesitation, and we would do whatever he says. The strength of our bodies isn't weak. We aren't called beast kings for no reason. Jun Moxie looked at Big Bear. His eyes were glittering with a luster of sincerity. In fact, Jun Moxie was left to feel that his future plans to exploit their strength were a bit despicable after he witnessed the genuine sincerity in their eyes. He faced upwards and sighed as he finally figured it out. One may need many schemes to motivate their subordinates to face the enemy. And one may need to use such scheme again and again. However, no such methods are required to seek help from a true friend. In fact, a little kindness would be enough to motivate them. And Big Bear was obviously such a person. He wouldn't forget someone's kindness until the day of his death. And such people were worth making friends with. Jun Moxie's expression became peculiarly gentle as he softly patted Big Bear's shoulder and said in an earnest tone, "Don't be like this, Big Bear. I genuinely consider you a friend." He let out a prolonged sigh and spoke, "I don't have many friends in this world. You are one of the very few, so you don't need to thank me." Big Bear's face lit up since he became overjoyed at these unexpected words. "Great. That's amazing. I was acting in a very unnatural manner. Ha ha." Jun Moxie chuckled gently. "Now it's your turn to keep guard while I help Crane King and fulfill my promise." Long Crane anxiously suggested, "You must have become very exhausted. Why don't you rest for a while and recuperate?" Jun Moxie replied, "No, I can still do it. Come on." He then extended his hand. Long Crane hesitated at first. He repeatedly sized up Jun Moxie to ensure he was all right before he eventually sat down. Some time had passed. Jun Moxie looked at the ecstasy-filled faces of Long Crane and Big Bear. And he suddenly felt very happy inside. In fact, he couldn't even describe this strange and unspeakable happiness. This kind of happiness was entirely different from the one he'd feel after his well-calculated plan had succeeded, or the ecstasy of suddenly discovering treasure, or even the relief after he had killed an enemy. This was a very pure form of happiness. And this strange happiness had surprisingly given Jun Moxie great joy. The struggle of fighting to death is very thrilling. But helping people on the odd occasion also feels very good. Jun Moxie smiled as he pondered. The young Master Jun had been feeling cheerful and content the entire night. Big Bear and Long Crane spared no efforts to invite their benefactor for a celebration. In fact, they even vowed that they already prepared some monkey wine as a token of their appreciation. It was very difficult for young Master Jun to decline the great kindness and repeated invites of the two Xian Beast Kings. And it would also be unreasonable to do so. Moreover, there was still a lot of time left before the break of dawn. Therefore, Jun Moxie gladly accepted their invite. The monkey wine was considered legendary in comparison to the inferior wines of the rest of the world. Therefore, it would be too big a waste of the opportunity if he didn't try it. Big Bear unendingly gave orders to the level 9 and level 8 Xian beasts as they proceeded forward, and asked them to bring the best and the tastiest wine. In fact, he even told them to deliver the wine at the speed which matches the Crane King's. Consequently, a huge chaos had been stirred up in the center of Tian. This turmoil was even greater than the one that the forest had witnessed at the time of the Xian Beasts' uprising. In fact, It was greater by a fair margin. The depths of the Tian Fa forest would usually be quiet in the middle of the night. But its sky was dust-ridden at this time. And the strongest Xian beasts were moving around like ordinary houseflies. In fact, it seemed as if they were scattering in disarray. The ruckus created during the Xian beasts' uprising was massive in scale, but it hadn't had any effect on the depths of Tian Fa. But the territory was suddenly witnessing a major fit of chaos in the middle of the night. The following visuals had suddenly become very common. A bear would be chaotically charging through the forest with a fruit wine from the northern side. His heavy footsteps would leave the ground to tremble. A golden tiger would be rushing alongside him with a fruit basket on his back. Someone would often turn a bend, but would unfortunately collide with a level 9 beast. A loud bang would be heard, and both of them would be thrown down to the ground. Consequently, the ground would end up being covered with the cherished fruits. The Tiger King, Lion King, and Falcon King also rushed in like a tornado in quick succession. They obviously knew that they wouldn't get many opportunities to drink on the same table as such a strong individual. And only a fool wouldn't do their utmost to take hold of such an opportunity. Maybe this person will help us make our breakthrough. Didn't we see how third and fourth brothers made their breakthroughs so mysteriously? No heavenly treasure apart from the sacred fruit can have such a terrifying effect. Right? Jun Moxie's eyes had opened wide when he saw the huge stone table in front of him. The young Master Jun felt dizzy when he saw the 2 wine cups. In fact, he suspected that Big Bear and Long Crane had perhaps invited him to bathe in the wine instead of drinking it. The sizes of these wine cups and the wine barrels are phenomenal. Even a bathtub isn't this huge. One golden-furred monkey was transporting a small barrel of monkey wine with sincere effort. However, a small barrel of monkey wine would be enough for Big Bear and Long Crane's drinking capacity. Consequently, one could see several golden-furred monkeys transporting more of those barrels towards this place from afar. Everyone without exception was putting their best efforts to task. Then, the chiefs of peak level 9 Xian beasts, level 9 Xian beasts, and level 8 Xian beasts came over. Each of them had a flattering expression on their faces as they offered some cherished fruits. In fact, they even wagged their tails before they retreated in a respectful manner. Dang! There are so many rare fruits here. Forget about eating or seeing them, they're only mentioned in the legends. These are so rare. Young Master Jun couldn't help himself as a light flashed in his eyes. How much money could I make if I took these back to Tianxiang? These fruits are amazing. But these Xian beasts are even more astonishing. Who has ever seen the faces of lions and bears with human-like expressions of flattery, as if they wished to belie their desire to curry a favor? I have. Moreover, it wasn't just one or two of them, or even a group or two of them. This was the case with each and every one of them. So, how could this scene not be weird? Each one of them had arrived prepared with the intention to welcome Jun Moxie. Consequently, Jun Moxie's self-importance shot up in a matter of seconds. He suddenly felt like a legendary figure, the Monkey King. He almost felt like the Monkey King from the fables. The Monkey King had created a ruckus on the heavenly mountains. Therefore, he had been banished. However, he was later proclaimed the King of the Mountains, and everyone had prostrated in front of him. This scene was something similar to that one. Such a pleasant day was one that was fit for the immortals only. Then, a huge white lion carefully came up to the stone table in a respectful manner. He then awkwardly cupped his 2 furry paws and arched his back as he faced Jun Moxie. After that, he took a seat with half of his posterior on the stone bench, while his flagpole-like tail wagged behind him nonstop. Jun Xie was stunned for a moment. And it took him a while before he realized that the lion had offered salutations to him. In fact, the beast had actually cupped his paws in courtesy. He's so polite. This is really astonishing. Big Bear made the introductions a while after the new arrival sat down. Senior, this is my sixth brother. He's the Lion King Careless Rock. Cool. Jun Xie coughed in a violent manner and said, Lion King? Is his surname genuinely related to that word for cow dung? Doesn't it stink? This name is very unique. Big Bear and Long Crane froze. They had been left dumbstruck by this remark. A dark line appeared on the Lion King's forehead. He wanted to drill a hole in the ground so that he could hide in it due to the embarrassment. The embarrassed Beast King then gave many meaningful looks to Big Bear. What it meant was, hurry up and explain my name to him. That meaning is making me nauseous. It's killing my mood to drink the wine. Senior may have misunderstood. The sixth brother's name means Careless Rock. And AHM, not carelessly defecated rocks. AHM. Long Crane coughed as he explained. So that's what it is. I guess I misunderstood because of my bias. I request the Lion King to not feel offended. Jun Xie nodded and cupped his hand towards the Lion King. The Lion King became calm once again. This mysterious person has actually apologized to me. His conduct genuinely befits that of such a skilled man. He had started to feel unhappy to his very stomach a moment ago. But he suddenly felt that he had regained some honor again. Another individual had also arrived some time ago. However, this one was in his human form, and was adorned in golden clothes. This individual was the Golden Tiger King. He too had wanted to speak up, but he found himself choking when he heard the remark that was made on the Lion King's name. However, he quickly bowed in salutation as Jun Xie's vision shifted towards his direction. He's the ninth. The Golden Tiger King Earthcracker. The corners of Big Bear's big mouth had drawn back into a smile while he made the introductions. He seemingly hadn't moved on from that previous remark yet. Tiger King. Earthcracker. Ah, this name is indeed bold and powerful. And it's interesting the way it corresponds with Big Bear. Jun Xie's expression was a gentle one behind the veil. The Golden Tiger King felt very happy about that comment. In fact, he had been overwhelmed by this senior's grace by the time he took his seat. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 390. I will do this for your reputation. Suddenly, a dark cloud appeared overhead as the Falcon King spread his huge wings and glided down. He arrived over everyone's head. After that, his body suddenly reduced in size and changed into a dark gray-clad grim man. A big aquiline nose hung from his face, and he looked very fierce. He cupped his hand in a deferential salute to Jun Xie after he landed. This is our 10th brother, the Falcon King Skybreaker. This introduction was made by the Crane King. It seemed that the airborne Xian beasts fell under Long Crane's command, and the terrestrial Xian beasts fell under Big Bear's command according to Tian Fa's hierarchical system. One could clearly see as a huge monkey as he rushed over from afar at a lightning speed. He was visibly larger than any other monkey around. He panted as he faced Jun Xie and made his salutations. This is our 7th brother, the Monkey King. His name is 7th Earl. Big Bear's eyes made it seem as if some matter had hurt his spirit. He said, You've already met our 8th younger sister, the Snake King. She has gone out with our eldest sibling for some work. So, they're not in the forest at this time. Our youngest brother has disappeared and hasn't been seen for the 3 years since. Oh, okay. I could only meet the Lord of Tian Fa Venerable Mei for a short time. And I really regret that. I had come to meet her as well, but it couldn't happen. What a pity. And that little girl, the Snake King, had acted with guts. She took responsibility, and I genuinely appreciate that. Jun Moxie chuckled as he uncovered the lid of his wine cup. The Beast Kings thought that he would drink, but they were bewildered to see that he didn't touch the wine cup for a while. But then, the wine cup floated in the sky, and a fragrance assailed their nostrils. This was the fragrance of the monkey wine. It then circled in midair like a whale which was swimming in seawater. After that, it went towards Jun Moxie and disappeared behind his veil. Jun Moxie took a sip and smacked his lips. He then closed his eyes. It seemed as if he was enjoying the aftertaste. He then said, "Good. This deserves to be called the monkey wine. It truly deserves its reputation." The Beast Kings had been stunned by this. This person is genuinely very skilled. Even the way he drinks wine is so unique. The Beast Kings had intended to take that opportunity to make Jun Moxie drink wine. They had believed that they would get to see the appearance of this mysterious master by doing so. But Jun Moxie had used that skill, and they had failed in their objective. However, they could only sigh since they felt a little disappointed. Jun Moxie then changed the topic and asked, "Oh yes. Big Bear, I'm a bit confused with the introductions you made a moment ago. I know that Tian Fa works with a hierarchical system like ours, and has always done so. That is no secret. The Tiger King is the 9th, and Falcon King is the 10th. So, why is it that they have taken their human form when the Lion King and the Monkey King are still in their beast forms even though they are the 6th and the 7th? These words immediately sunk the atmosphere and made it restrictive. The eyes of the Lion King and Monkey King had suddenly brimmed with extreme sadness. Senior has asked this question. So, we will answer. This isn't really a secret. Lion King and Monkey King had left Tian Fa for their adventures 60 years ago. Long Crane continued in a deep and pensive tone, but they lacked experience with the world outside. So, they had revealed themselves and their whereabouts after they had gone out. 4 of the 8 great masters had joined hands and had launched a pincer attack on them. It had been an arduous battle. The 6th and 7th weren't able to match them. In fact, they were barely able to escape with their lives. They had nearly been turned into corpses by the great master's hands. They were lucky to escape, but not without unavoidable injuries. In fact, they fled that battle with incurable injuries. We were able to save their lives, but they had suffered irrevocable damages. Consequently, they have fallen back to level 9. These 2 have also lost their ability to take on the human form ever since. And they still haven't been able to get over that injury. Crane King then spoke with grief and indignation. Lei Baoyu and Bu Kuangfeng had been amongst those 4 great masters. Those 2 bastards. Eldest was extremely furious when this happened. Eldest even stormed the elusive world of immortals to look for justice. But that wasn't enough to deal with the power of the elusive world of immortals. So, there was no choice but to leave the matter unsettled. Ah! Lion King and Monkey King hung their heads down in sadness. Their strengths had been impaired, and their cultivations had suffered serious setbacks. Consequently, even the seniority of their position in Tian Fa wasn't guaranteed to last. In fact, they would have to cup their paws and surrender their titles of beast kings if another beast from their respective species ever reached the peak of level 9. There had been many lion and monkey beasts who had reached close to the peak of level 9 over the years. The difference in strength wasn't that great either. Those said beasts were only a step behind. And this posed a serious threat to the leadership of the two beast kings. They would be helpless if their strengths fell short. That was the standard rule. And rules must be obeyed. Tyrannical strength was everything. Moreover, the situation in both of the Beast Kings groups had slowly become discordant over years. It didn't resemble the situation from that time in the past when their word was law. There had been a time when they had commanded strict obedience, absolute authority, and absolute strength. However, that time had come to pass. In fact, they would have already lost their positions if the other Beast Kings weren't helping them in secrecy. However, the Xian beast groups had always favored the strong and discarded the weak. This was an uneasy truth which had been as such since eternity. Their groups may have some warm feelings towards them. However, their own kind would have no choice but to comply with the basic laws of survival of the strongest if a viable candidate were to appear within their groups. And Big Bear and the others couldn't get involved in their internal strife for the position of Beast King when that time came. It would be the end for those kings when that time came. You've got injured, hee. What injury could be sharp enough to have such grave consequences? Let me have a look. Perhaps I can heal it, can't say for sure though. These words had barely exited Jun Moxie's mouth, and the 6 Xian beast kings had already begun to tremble. Their eyes were filled with a look of ecstasy. Who's this man in front of us? He's a great and unmatched person. I'm sure that there's nothing that he can't accomplish. He hasn't said that he can help them for certain. But the two beast kings have hope as long as he tries. This individual possesses the strength that has helped two beast kings to advance without a hitch. So, what would some insignificant injuries be for him? The lion and the monkey king were moved by this. In fact, their bodies had somewhat started to tremble. The hope that they had been waiting for had finally presented itself. Jun Moxie calmly extended his hand and lightly touched Lion King's broad and furry shoulder. After that, a strand of refreshing and pure divine aura entered into his meridians. The Lion King suddenly felt very comfortable as this happened. That small strand of aura cycled through the meridians inside his body. It continued to cycle for a while until Jun Moxie retracted his hand. After that, he lightly put his hand on the Monkey King's shoulder. The faces of the Beast Kings had nervousness written over them as they looked at him. However, not a single one of them dared to utter a single word for fear that they might disturb that very able person. They couldn't see that mysterious person's expression since Jun Moxie's face was covered with a veil. So, they could only try their best to try and guess his expression. However, Jun Moxie's expression was very mild and placid. Jun Moxie eventually stopped after he had expended his efforts. He then slowly let out a sigh. But the breath in his sigh seemed biting and angered to the 6 beast kings. In fact, the hearts of the 6 of them had begun to throb. The condition of 6th Rock and 7th Earl isn't good. Their meridians have been inflicted with heavy damages. Moreover, a portion of them have been shattered. And this has blocked the cycling of the aura from their dantian. Also, there's an unfathomable, malicious, and mysterious power which has remained hidden inside their meridians. And this power is rather hard to deal with. That malicious power brings about the unceasing destruction of your foundation. In fact, You should have been able to recover a long time ago if it weren't for this. There isn't too much of that energy inside you. But it's still enough to bring your cultivation to a standstill. In fact, it has been reducing your cultivation in a slow and steady manner. I'm sure that the signs of tendency have already emerged. Jun Moxie sighed and said, "This is a very sinister Xian skill. Which of those four great masters did this to you?" The lion and the monkey king blankly stared at each other. And they spontaneously saw the answer in each other's eyes. The lion king moistened his claws with the wine and slowly wrote something on the table. They had lost the ability to take on the human form. So, they had also lost their ability to speak like humans. But they were still able to write. The great master of the evil winds in Huang Quan. So it was the great master of the evil winds move. It's not surprising that it was so sinister. Long Crane and the others exclaimed in unison. "Senior, you've examined them, is there no hope? Can they be cured?" Big Bear asked nervously. Lion King, Monkey King, and the other four-footed Xian beasts came under Big Bear's jurisdiction. Moreover, they had been working together for a long time. So, they were very close to each other. It was unknown how many pains Big Bear would have to take, and how much time it would take to form such a close partnership with anyone again. That sharp and sinister injury from the great master of the evil wind is 60 years old. Jun Moxie intentionally or unintentionally started to shake his head. The lion and the monkey king saw this very skilled person, and felt that he looked helpless in the face of danger. So, they couldn't help but feel disheartened since their hopes had turned to dust. Big Bear's expression underwent a drastic change as well. "Don't tell me that there is no hope." Jun Moxie looked at the urgency of Big Bear's expression and let out a long sigh. He had a warm color in his eyes. "This is a matter of grudges which are 60 years old. And I didn't wish to get involved. But I can't watch that expression on your face, Big Bear. I guess it's faded. So I will help you. These injuries are quite severe, but they aren't untreatable. In Huang Quan must be quite ruthless, but he's nothing in my eyes." This had showed off Big Bear's enormous reputation. Big Bear was moved after he heard those words. His big and furry face had started to revel with pride and glory. His face exposed an arrogant grin, but he didn't know what to say. "I can't watch that expression of your face. Dang! This has got me excited." The lion and the monkey kings had started to tremble unconsciously. This news was no less than sudden thunder from the sky to their ears. In fact, their beating hearts had almost come to a stop. They had been in hell a moment ago and they were suddenly in heaven. They had no hope at first. So, they had no option but to despair. Then, they had received such a huge surprise. The despaired lion and monkey king had been overwhelmed. After all, they had seen that deity-like senior look helpless a moment ago. Moreover, that mysterious person had given them a negative reaction a second ago. However, this kind of a wound was a piece of cake for Jun Moxie in reality. This was very similar to the time when Jun Wuyi's legs had been severely injured. A spirit Xian exert would have to give their all, and would have to use the entirety of their medical expertise in order to cure it. However, the victim would still suffer a lot of damage to their cultivation if that were to happen. Moreover, even that spirit Xian helper's cultivation would suffer a great loss. Big Bear and Long Crane's breakthroughs were another example of such an instance. In fact, the lords of the three holy lands may join hands, but they would still regard this matter as impossible. But This untreatable injury was nothing for young Master Jun. This story will be continued to chapter 391. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.